Hello, welcome to stream. I am debating about whether I should do this video right now. We actually made a set review of the entire Moons of Elsweyr, and we were uploading them, and we realized, for some reason, we can't find our blue episode. So we're thinking about redoing it, which is going to be intense considering it was like a 2-hour video, if not 3-hour video. But I think if we tackle it this time, we're going to have to go faster, and we're going to exercise brevity. So I'm mentally preparing myself, figuring out if I want to eat something before we tackle this set. Okay, we can go the speed run first, maybe, and then we can just delete it if it doesn't make any sense. But I'll be right back. Let me get more water. All right. Let's tackle this. I don't want to do tech. Hold on. Okay, so we're gonna go fast. Midnight Trespasser, 1 Magicka, Dark Elf, 2/2, consume a creature to gain +1/+1. So normally we talk about worst case scenarios, middle case scenarios, and best case scenarios. So the worst case scenario of this card is it's 1 Magicka for a 2/2. You don't do any consuming and you play it on curve. I think this makes it playable, slightly worse than a Crown Quartermaster in terms of it doesn't generate a dagger, but it does have better stats. In the middle case scenario, you're able to play it not on curve as a turn 1 play, but you're able to consume a creature and play 1 Magicka 3/3. I think that's amazing. 1 Magicka 3/3, very Magicka efficient. Haunting Spirit is a 3 Magicka 3/3. In its best case scenario, you consume a creature that has a bonus. So you're consuming things like Ill-Fated Scholar. When Ill-Fated Scholar is consumed, summon a 3/2 Insidious Spirit. So when you consume a Insidious Scholar, not only do you get a 3/3 for 1 Magicka, you also generate a 3/2. So you basically get 6/5 worth of stats with a Midnight Trespasser consuming an Ill-Fated Scholar. So that would be the best case scenario. So in the worst case scenario, I think this card is playable, slightly worse than Crown Quartermaster. Middle case scenario, it's above average for its magicka and very magicka efficient. And in its best case scenario, this thing is a crazy 1 magicka play. Granted, you need to find the condition. The condition for its best case scenario is that you're able to put things like Ill-Fated Scholar into the grave. Or Imbued Argonian, for example. If you consume Imbued Argonian, you get +1/+1 guard, so it's a 1 magicka 4/4 with guard. Not bad. This card has seen a rise in popularity in a variety of aggressive decks. Assassin, Sorcerer, definitely a sleeper. I think people underestimated this card. You'll see it quite a bit in competitive play. So I would say this is quite a good card, very versatile. Again, we're going to go faster than normal. We've actually filmed this set review once, and we lost the video. So we're just going to go over things fast. Frazzled Alfiq, 2 magicka, Khajiit, 1/2, wax, deal 1 damage. That means odd turns, wane, +1/+1. Even turns, after you play another card waxed, deal 1 damage. After you play another card waned, +1/+1. So, first of all, let's talk about, if it's played on curve, it's waned. So, waned is, it's 2 magicka, so if it's played on an even turn, you get a 2/3 for 2. A 2/3 for 2 magicka, and you have the ability to generate more value with this bonus effect. I think that in its worst case scenario, played on curve, it is playable because I already play Reflective Automaton. Reflective Automaton is a card that is played simply because of its ability, and its 2/3 stat line is good enough to contest Wardcrafter, so you're not dying to Wardcrafter on board. And I think that's really important because the 2-drop that all 2-drops should be compared to, especially blue 2-drops, is Wardcrafter. So Reflective Automaton's good enough to be seeing play, and given that, that makes Alfiq, Frazzled Alfiq as a 2/3 completely fine. Vanilla 2/3 is fine. Now the engine value is upside. Played on an odd turn, so let's say you play it on turn 1 with the Ring of Magicka, or you play it on turn 3, slightly Magicka inefficient, or you pair it with a 1-drop. You have the Float of Magicka point. You'll get a 1/2 and deal 1 damage, which might seem kind of bad. But that is technically a 2/2 for 2 magicka. Played odd. And I think that's actually worse than the wane, unless you're able to trigger more value. So that's worth noting, I think the wane is a little bit more acceptable, played without any bonus effects. Wax is a little bit lackluster unless you're using it to snipe off wards like a rapid shot, or you're using it in a very clutch way, so it's possible to squeeze a lot of value out of the wax. But generally speaking, when you're playing this card, you're trying to trigger its additional ability. So how is this additional ability played is basically if you play other wax and wane cards such as Cartel Arcanists or Rebellion Generals, this thing starts shooting things, lightning bolts, starts dealing 1 damage here and there, and when it's waned, it starts getting buff, which is crazy because it was a 2/3 and it becomes a 3/4 2-drop if you play another wax wane creature. That's pretty ginormous. So when talking about wax and wane cards, the worst case scenario is you play it on curve and you trigger the wane or the wax and nothing else, no additional value. The middle case scenario is you're able to get one of these and then you're able to trigger maybe once or twice. Now the best case scenarios are twofold. 1, you either get a Rebellion General, or 3, you're able to trigger it with your Moongate, or both. So I feel like its worst case scenario is acceptable. Even the dealing 1 damage basically makes it the reverse of a Wardcrafter, because a Wardcrafter is a 2/1, and the deal 1 damage deals with Ward. As a 2/3, you're kind of comparable to Reflective Automaton, so that's the worst case scenario. Middle case scenario, let's say you're able to trigger it once. So you're a 2-drop 3/4, or you're a 2-drop that has done 2 damage, which makes it a Fireball. So that means you've done a Fireball but we should know the deal 1 damage can go face, and it can also go, which is unlike a fireball, and it's splittable. It can be split between different targets, meaning it can be very effective, maybe in a finish-off deck, or in a sheer point deck or something like this. I haven't seen it used like that very often, but this kitty can get out of control. So a 1 Magicka 1/2 is eh, and then the 1 Magicka Firebolt that can split up between 2 things is what you get if you trigger Wax twice. A little bit worse than the Wane, but it can come clutch. And if you can trigger this multiple times, it can definitely wipe the board. Especially imagine you have multiple Frazzled Alfiques. If you play 1 Frazzled Alfique and you play another one, you're starting to get these bonuses twice. So most Wax and Wane creatures can't be talked in isolation without talking about Rebellion General. Rebellion General triggers all Wax abilities of creatures like that, or Wane abilities, depending if it's on an odd turn or an even turn. But if you have Moongate, you can trigger both. So let's say you have this card, Frazzle Alfique, and you use Moongate. You'll get a 2/3 that deals 1 damage for 2 Magicka. Okay, not that impressive. Rebellion General with Wax and Wane is a different story. If you played this card, with this card's on the board, let's say this card's on the board as a 1/2, and you played a Rebellion General. Rebellion General would say deal 1 damage, and then buff it, so it becomes potentially a 3/4 with Moongate. So 3/4, and it deals another point of damage. At the same time, it also becomes a 4/5 because it triggers again, because the Rebellion General triggers this. So Rebellion General would trigger this part again. So Rebellion General would trigger this with the Moongate, and then this part would trigger because of the Rebellion General. Therefore, this would happen twice. So you'd deal 2 damage, and you'd get +2/+2 for Rebellion General Moongate. Assuming you'd already been 2/3, +2/+2 is a 4/5. So that's kind of scary. Certainly a card that you cannot ignore if you're against. So I think in the best case, so acceptable worst case scenario, middle case scenario is a little bit meh. But the best case scenarios, the upside of Frazzled Alfique is quite high. I think this kind of card is a card that can be built around. If you had a 50 card deck, Assassin would probably be the most likely to use this, since it has higher access to Rebellion Generals. Dominion theoretically could run this and have Rebellion Generals and the draw a card, the green Moongate, the Moonface Sothé, while the Willpower could also give you Queen's Captain. So generally speaking, the Dominion colors would have the best, because Monk is the best Wax and Wane combo right now. Cards like Frazzled Alfique will become much better as more Wax and Wane cards are released. Unfortunately, I highly doubt that's going to be the case. I doubt there will be more Wax and Wane cards, but if there were, that would spike Frazzled Alfique's power. So overall, I think this is a good card. So these first 2 cards are very good. It should be noted that blue has since become the best color in TESL ever since of Alfique Conjure. So we'll discuss that hopefully deeper. Khajiit Warhelm, 2 Magicka item, +1/+3. Summon the wielder, deals 1 damage to your opponent. So this might seem kind of weird, but basically this triggers Pilfer. So if you put the Khajiit Warhelm on cards that are like this, if you put it on Cereal, it would reduce the top. It would count as a Pilfer attack. If you put it on a Burglar, the Burglar will immediately drain you 1 life, and it'll become 8/8. If you put it on Sailthrough Storm, it would literally summon the top creature of your deck, even before it had a chance to attack. So that is a reasonable use case for this. Also, 2 Magicka +1/+3 is kind of like a combat trick. You're basically using this to get a valuable trade. So you have a creature that might seem a little weak in 1 lane, and you place this on that creature to survive a value trade. I think that's a very good use case for this. It's kind of like the blue version of another card that you would see in Willpower. Don't know what it's called. but it's a Gavel of the Ordinator. So Gavel of the Ordinator, +2/+0. The wielder's immune to damage this turn. Sometimes the wielder's immune to damage is very valuable, sometimes it doesn't really matter. And blue can be this, this mask thing is basically used in the same way, because I mean that's giving +2/+0. That's 2/+2 stats, temporary immunity. This is +4 worth of stats, permanent. And the wielder, if it's able to use Pilfer, that can be crazy. Like that could be very meaningful on something like Monastic Champion. Placed on a Monastic Champion, it could summon a 5/3. 3/3. Now that is a little weird, being able to play this and then that on top of it, so it's more likely that this is played on a smaller creature. Hello, welcome stream. If you're just joining us for the first time, we are going through our second... we are reviewing this blue set for the second time because we lost footage on the first one. So we're just speeding through it. The first time we did it, we were like so detailed. So this time we're just zoom. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and maybe, or any good ideas on how things like Khajiit Warhelm can be used, please let me know. I have not personally put this in a deck, but I have a friend who has, and he had good words to review about it. Wielder deals 1 damage. I'm trying to think of more use cases. At the moment, not really thinking about it, but I think this is decent. I think it's worth it. It would be better if it had like Mobilize, for sure, because then that'd be a 2/4 for 2 Magicka. That'd be crazy. So I think worst case scenario, it's facilitating a combat trick. That's good. Middle case scenario, or like worst case scenario, is you're just playing this and you're just dealing 1 damage to your face. That's like the really worst case scenario. The middle case scenario is you put this and you have a good trade in front of you and you're able to survive the trade. Now the best case scenario is you're able to make use of the trading aspect and you're able to get something useful from the Pilfer. And if you get something useful from the Pilfer, it's worth noting that this also triggers Empower. So if you're playing things like Spoils of War, if you have Spoils of War in your deck, this would make Spoils of War cost 1 less. So that could become a relevant thing. Empower is not too crazy popular, but the few Empower cards that do exist are very powerful. So, like Channeled Storm, Spoils, and Debilitate are really good cards, I think. So if there are more Empower cards released in the future, that's something to be looking out for. Okay, I think this card is alright. It's more conditional, and it's definitely, I think surprise factor is a huge part of this card. So you don't run too many of these. So this is a card that you might run 1 of, and it just, because you don't, running 3 of a card, my philosophy is, if you put 3 of a card, kind of a card in a deck, you're communicating that you want to see it in opening hand, and you don't mind seeing 2 of them in a game. So if you saw 2 Khajiit Warhelms in your opening hand, and you think that's a problem, that means you have too many copies. Now, 2 of a kind for me is that you don't necessarily want to see an opening hand, but you don't mind seeing an opening hand, and you're okay if you only see 1 in a game. Well, 0 to 1 in a game, because you may not see a 2 of. So, a Khajiit Warhelm kind of, it's hard for me to even say 2 of, but I'd say as a 1 of, it could definitely make a game-winning play. So it does have its place. And I think 1 ofs can be very surprising because they're very difficult to play around, because if I put a card in front of Field Lane and you're on blue and you did something like, oh, I'm going to contest him, and I did Khajiit Warhelm, you'd just be like, wow, what just happened? Because no one plays that card. That's when you get maximum value out of this. Wandering Skeleton. Wandering Skeleton, 2 Magicka, 2/2 Skeleton, Last Grasp, summon a 1/1 Skeleton. I think this card's good. I think it's really annoying. So it's like worst case scenario is you get a 2-drop 2/2 and it gets silenced and it dies by like Sorcerer Negation. So nothing happens. So it's like and in that worst case scenario, it's completely fine because the answer to it is also 2 Magicka. So one way you look at TESL is, what's my, like if I played a card for 2 magicka, how much magicka did it cost for him to remove it? How many cards did he have to answer my card with? So you could see, these are 2 things that pay attention. So if I played a 1 card and it's 2 magicka, and your answer is 1 card, 2 magicka, we're both even. Now if he played a card that is like 1 magicka, like execute, and killed it, he still hasn't actually dealt with the whole card. I now have a 1/1 skeleton. So then he might have to use another card like a fireball. And now that's when I'm ahead, because I did 2 magicka and he did 2 magicka, but he did 2 cards. So I did 2 magicka in 1 card, he did 2 magicka in 2 cards. You understand? So execute and fireball answering a wandering skeleton is him losing, me winning. Now, middle case scenario is you're going to get full value on this. I think it's 2 magicka, 2/2, you get an attack in or so, and you're going to die and you get a skeleton. Now that's okay, that's okay. That means you're not making use of any skeleton synergies and you're just using it for the 2 bodies, and it's kind of annoying to deal with. I think it's reasonable, considering Wardcrafter is kind of, it's in the same theme of Wardcrafter being a 2-drop that is not immediately or fully answered in a single attack. Slightly potentially worse than Wardcrafter, because Wardcrafter has the ability to basically do what Khajiit Warhelm does, because Wardcrafter has the flexibility of giving another creature ward that's already in a favorable trading position on board. Versus Wandering Skeleton cannot actually assist any cards that are its allies. It's kind of, it's like the Wardcrafter putting ward on itself, which is usually not the best use case of Wardcrafter anyway. Like Wardcrafter's best use case is when he's warding somebody else, not herself. Now the best use case for Wandering Skeleton is when you make use of skeleton synergies and these 2/2s and 1/1s are not 2/2s and they're not 1/1s. So if you look at things like skeleton, so skeletons are all in basically blue and purple. I don't think this card deserves to be put in skeleton decks, so let's just say all skeletons are in blue and purple. And the cards that would synergize nicely with this are mainly found in purple. So you do things like Skeleton Champion. Give other friendly skeletons +1/+1. This turns your 2/2 into a 3/3, or your 2/2 or 1/1 into a 2/2. And that is a big deal. Like, in my experience, Skeleton Champion is a serious threat. He turns all these small, difficult to answer creatures, or not, he turns these small creatures that you don't really want to answer into creatures that you have to answer. Because they are like, the damage they add, it starts adding up like crazy. Or your Bone Colossus, other friendly skeletons have +1/+1. So in a skeleton deck, I'm 100% sure this card is a must-see. I don't actually know why skeleton decks kind of like disappeared, because I definitely saw them in the early stages of Moons of Elsweyr. I definitely saw people run these Bone Colossus decks, and I thought they were pretty decent. I think they're, I'm not fully sure why they were, like I didn't play them myself, so I don't know what matchups they suffered so badly against that they kind of disappeared a little bit. But against my particular decks, I can say Skeleton Champion and Bone Colossus synergizing with your said skeleton start to make this little guy do a lot more. And you should, when we look at a 2/2 and you think, well, +1/+1's not that much, it's literally plus 50% value. If I told you tomorrow your house or whatever investment you had is going to go up by 50%, you would be ecstatic. 50% increase in anything is crazy. It's a big deal. And you could actually say it's 50% increase on the 2/2, and if it's a Bone Colossus, let's say they kill the Wandering Skeleton, well, said 1/1 skeleton's now +1/+1, so that's getting 100% increase, because it's basically a double its stats. So I think this card's it's a good enough card to actually be included in non-skeleton decks, and I think in skeleton decks it's a must. It's a must. I think skeleton decks might have suffered a little bit because of maybe their curve had problems with the Elfie Conjure and Temple Conjures. Maybe they didn't fit that well. Maybe there's just so many better options in Sorcerer and so many better options. Like there are a lot of good cards in blue and purple aggressive decks. So skeleton decks kind of, I think their competitive advantage is Bone Colossus, and I personally don't have 3 Bone Colossus. So that could also be a artificial. So that could be artificial superiority. So basically, you might not see that many skeleton decks because maybe not that many people have Bone Colossus. So if more people had Bone Colossus, maybe you'd see more skeleton decks. Good morning, Gusto Purple. Cartel Arcanist. 3 Magicka Khajiit, 2/3 Wax, +2/+0 Wayne, Shackle, and enemy creature. I would have told you this card's completely garbage, but the last time I played against it, it was not garbage because it triggered twice on a Rebellion General. And that was horribly painful because this thing was it was a 2/3 that shackled me, and then it became a 4/3 that shackled me, and there were already creatures on the board, and I was dead on turn 5. So like my instinct says this is a bad creature. The reasons why I think this is a bad creature is because there are a lot of shackle cards in green and blue. But that's the kind of combo deck that's the kind of deck that wants this. Green blue is assassin, right? This deck already has a lot of shackle. Harpy, Ash Oppressor. We can look at a couple of them. Maybe I should talk about the stats of this a little bit, then we can move to those ones and make some comparisons because they're very comparable. But no one said you can't just put them all in the same deck, right? So maybe it might not be the best shackler, but if you want a really serious shackle tempo-based aggro deck that just shackles everything and just kills the other person in turn 5, maybe it has a place. Worst case scenario is you're triggering Wax or you're triggering Wayne. So this is 3 Magicka, so if played on curve, you're getting Wax. So you're going to get a 4/3 for 3 Magicka, which is on-die Clan Sorcerer, but no on-die Clan Sorcerer ability. Or a Corner Club Gambler, no Corner Club Gambler ability. Slightly worse than a Young Mammoth, no Breakthrough, and 1 toughness less, which kind of makes it... which is kind of a big deal. So that is a little concerning. Now, so as a worst case scenario, getting Wax is a little bit like you'd rather put an on-die Clan Sorcerer in the deck if that was what was going to happen, okay? Now, if you play it off curve, so you play it either on turn 2 with the Ring of Magicka, it's turn 2, but you ring it out, then you're just getting a 2/3 shackle, which is like, okay, you're basically spending 50% more Magicka than a Harpy for 2 more toughness. Is that worth it? And you don't have Prophecy. Probably the answer is no. Considering if you're ringing out a 3-drop, on turn 2 that has such weak stats, like, you could have... The Assassin deck's trying to kill people, so why not play things like Sentinel Reclaimer, which is the 3-drop, and it gives you like 4 damage for 3 Magicka. That thing's notoriously dangerous. So I think Cartel Arcanist as a card, worst case scenario, it's pretty bad. Now, middle case scenario, it's pretty bad because the other options are very good. Let's put it that way. The middle case scenario is, let's say you're able to trigger both with our Moon Gate. Our Moon Gate says we can do Wax and Wayne, so now we're saying, okay, well, we're 3 Magicka, 4/3, and Shackle Creature. I think that's good. I think if you're able to get a Shackle Creature and a 4/3 and a 3 Magicka, 3. The thing is, it's artificially 3. You're technically paying 3.5 Magicka for that because Moongate's 1 Magicka for 2 uses. So technically using Moongate once is half a Magicka. So if you use this and you use this, it's 3.5 Magicka for both abilities. And I think that's really good. I think 3.5 Magicka for Shackle Wax is very good if the game plan is to kill them and just ignore their creatures and to keep shackling them over and over again. And it becomes, and I say it's good only because I've experienced what that actually can look like when there are Mournhold Traders and Corner Clubs already on the board, but I think it's slightly better played off curve as opposed to played on curve, because those decks, if they have this in opening hand, should throw this card back away as fast as possible. I don't care if you have ring or no ring, throw this far away and draw into this already having threats on the board. The Shackle is most relevant when you already have Mournhold Traders and Corner Clubs already putting pressure, and then the Cartel Arcanist just makes it impossible for them to answer you with creatures. Like if they put like a Haunting Spirit down to contest your 4/4, and then you just shackle it. Now that what are they going to do? Like they have a 3/3 in front of a 4/4 Mournhold Trader. They didn't even get the first attack in, and then they're shackled. And then now if they did attack into it, Mournhold Trader's still not dead. Then they have to attack into it again. And this is the kind of tempo they generate, where the Mournhold Trader can live artificially maybe 2 more turns simply because of a shackle play. Then the Cartel Arcanist is reactivated by a Rebellion General, and then the shackling happens again, and it's just like, wow, it feels bad. I put these creatures. So this card kind of not so good against guards, but pretty good against people who are relying on like Doomfang allies, and maybe even other aggressive mirror, other guys who are just trying to rely on trading you. So the best case scenario that we kind of hinted at is when this card is activated both by the Moongate and the Rebellion General. So it's activated by the Moongate. You want to separate the turns. Usually you want to separate the turns. So Cartel Arcanist, 3.5 Magicka, 4/3 Shackle creature. Then you do 4.5 Magicka, the Rebellion General. Rebellion General comes in, 4.5 Magicka because he's used in conjunction with a second charge on the Moongate. Activating for, now she becomes a 6/3 that shackles probably the same creature that was shackled originally. Could be a new draining creature like a Hand of Dagoth. Could be Queen Baronzaya. 6 attack is nothing to laugh at. I mean, she's gonna, like, the opponent will feel it, especially when they're taking all that other damage. So I think that's the best case scenario, and you're looking to win on literally that turn or the next turn. So I think the best case scenario is kind of niche, but it's definitely something that can be pulled off. So underrated. I think this card's underrated, and I think it's because the worst case scenario just looks so bad. And the middle case scenario is and then the best case scenario is like, wow, I'm dead. Like there's such a huge difference between the worst case scenario and the best case scenario on this card. Unlike some of these other cards, the worst case and the best case scenario on Wandering Skeleton, the delta, the difference is not very it's not very great. Okay, so let's look at other 3 card shackles for some comparisons. So you're looking at things like Ash Oppressor, who shackles if you have 5 power creature or more. It's conditional, but stronger body, coming out as a 4/3, doesn't need. So the other card is a 4/3 or shackles, the one we just talked about. Saint Pet, 2/2 lethal shackle, so that's an option, right? Illicit Butcher, 4/3 consume a creature to shackle enemy creature. So this costs 1 Magicka more and needs a body in the grave. But if realistically speaking, if you have this card on turn 4, there's going to be a body to consume. And while this might seem like objectively worse, Illicit Butcher's upside is if it's consuming things like our Ill-Fated Scholar or our Crocodile. So like it can use that consume as a advantage, because it could be consume equals draw a card, consume equals generate a 3/2. Yeah, for sure that can be very bad, like very bad for your opponent. It's certainly something that needs setup, so it's not one of those cards that gets full value just being played out. So shackle. And then you got your good old Deepwood Trapper, which actually just might straight up be better. In fact, because like it's just 1 Magicka, and this thing can like shackle. Like this she shackles things all the time. especially when you like put items on her. So those are shackle options. That's the assassin's shackle options. Oh, Icy Shambles. Forgot about Icy Shambles. Okay, so we can return to our other Moons of Elsweyr cards. Discerning Thief. Let's go. Hi. Hi, Zeph Gaming. Well, that's really cool. That's very nice of you to say. Discerning Thief, Khajiit, 3 Magicka, 3/4, pilfer, draw a card, then discard a card. Card's crazy good. It's crazy good, largely because... Wow, was that... We flew by. Is that an Alliance War card? So Grey Viper Brigand is seen as a crazy good card. I mean, it feels good to play a Grey Viper Brigand, whether you're on offense or defense. A little bit better on the defense side, but like playing a Grey Viper Brigand, I've usually felt pretty solid about it. And basically, it's the same stat line as Discerning Thief. So I think that was the first to tell that it'd be a pretty good card, was as a 3/4 for 3 Magicka. It's no Mournhold Trader, but it's certainly a sturdy body. Like, like other 3 magic cards in blue are things like Daggerfall Mage, 2/2 ward. It's unfortunately been eaten by so many executes because it's 2 attack or Sorcerer's Negations. So Discerning Thief has none of that kind of liability because it's like kind of meaty as a 3/4. Also, it has a pretty useful ability, which it comes into play more often than the Grey Viper Brigand. So Grey Viper Brigand says 3 Magicka, 3/4. I do something if there's another Grey Viper Brigand in the grave, which doesn't actually come into play most of the time. Like, from what I've seen, that does not actually happen. That only happens in the control versus control matchup, or if you've already stabilized. And it's something that you never can even count on. So in many cases, it's just 3 for 3/4. Discerning Thief, on the other hand, his ability is not contingent upon something like that. It's like already, it's like ready to go out of the box. And you could start using it if you can get an attack in. So we can talk about what the ability does. Draw a card, then discard a card. Might seem a little bit like, that didn't do anything. Like, it drew a card, but then I discarded a card. Well, I actually used to think that way, but that's definitely not how I think about it now. So let's talk about why that's not. It's much more useful than it looks like on face value. All right, Crown Quartermaster. I play a Crown Quartermaster. What does a Crown Quartermaster do? She gives you a 1 Magicka, 1/1/0 Steel Dagger, okay? What if I told you you could discard that card and draw a card? That's what Discerning Thief's first use case is. You take cards that you trash, that you generate, and you throw it away for another card. Let's take Manic Jack. Manic Jack's Manic Mutation is similar. Okay, so you draw, when you draw those dual cards, you draw 2 cards. Like, you draw 1 card, but it breaks into 2, right? Using Discerning Thief, you can throw away either Manic Jack or the mutation and start to generate card advantage. So that means on your turn, you drew 1 card, but when I use Discerning Thief, I turn that 1 card into 2 cards. So you can turn cards that were not cards into cards. Like, the Steel Dagger is not a card. Like, when I say it's not a card that you drew. So, like, if I play Crown Quartermaster, it generates me a Steel Dagger. I pilfer, draw a card, and then I discard the Steel Dagger. I traded the Steel Dagger for a higher quality card. Same thing with the Manic Mutation. You drew 1 card from the top, it split into 2. Now you could turn 1 card into 2 cards by throwing away both Jack and the mutation, should you want to. So Discerning Thief has first that ability to turn non-cards into cards, or to turn what was 1 card into 2 cards. This also comes into play with like Sentinel Reclaimer, kind of. Sentinel Reclaimer is kind of both of those things, right? It's the 3-drop that generates a +1/0 and a +3/0. So then it's kind of like a Manic Jack and a Crown Quartermaster. So Discerning Thief has the ability to kind of toss that away, but in my experience, I would never throw away that stuff. Maybe the Steel Dagger, but never the Sword. The Sword's too good. +3/+0 for 2 Magicka is pretty good. It's better than a Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt's 4 Magicka. Lightning Bolt's 1 Magicka for 1 damage. When you play 2 Magicka for +3 damage, you're paying even better than Lightning Bolt. So the third use case of Discerning Thief is she actually lets you play crazy greedy cards like Wilds Incarnate. Because, hello Germanus. Oh, that's awesome. I'm very glad that you enjoyed that game. That game was my favorite game in all of TESL. I played 1,000 games at least, and I think that was my favorite game, especially because Gumshoe's my friend. If you want to check out what Germanus is talking about, I posted on my YouTube my last video, or second to last video, was my favorite game. It's a pretty crazy game. Okay, I was talking about Wilds Incarnate. This card, okay, so everyone knows about Wilds Incarnate, right? Like, we can just bring it up just in case someone doesn't know. It's possible someone doesn't know what it is, right? So Wilds Incarnate is like the greedy card. It's like the greed card that so it's 7 Magicka, you play this, draw a card, you have 4 runes. Basically, if no one attacked, if you draw 2 cards. If they did attack you and broke only 1 rune, you draw 1. The dream on this card is you draw 2 cards, right? So you want to draw more cards, right? Now the problem with Wilds Incarnate is, in some matchup, it's just straight up dead. It's like a dead card. The reason why it's dead, like, there are just matchups where when you put this in the gate card, so there are matchups you put this in your deck and you ask yourself, why is this even in my deck? Because it literally doesn't do anything. Like, the opponent's too fast, they're already broken 2 runes, 7 Magic or 5/6 guard without card draw is kind of lackluster. So then you start like smacking yourself in the face, or like, you know what I'm talking about. It's like palm face. And then there are matchups this card is so good that this is like, yeah, I just won because of Wilds Incarnate. Like, that's how polarizing Wilds Incarnate is. Well, have no fear, Discerning Thief is here. Because Discerning Thief knows when Wilds Incarnate is good and when Wilds Incarnate's bad. So when you put Wilds Incarnates in your deck, and it's a matchup that you think it's a dead card, or you know it's a dead card, you just throw away your dead cards. So Discerning Thief allows your deck building to be a little bit more flexible, to include things like Wilds Incarnate, and turn these dead cards into another card. Because you're basically transforming your cards, because you can cycle with Discerning Thief. Every time she pilfers, it's like, oh, I'm against aggro, Wilds Incarnates in my deck, in my hand, throw it away, give me something else better. And the good news is you get to draw the top card, and then you can choose from your hand what to throw away. And when you have that kind of decision making, you're thinking to yourself, okay, what's the worst card in my hand for this situation? And no matter, even if all your cards are good and you had to throw away that beautiful Edict of Azura, if you're like Tribunal, your hand ultimately improved. Like, this card's ability basically says, attack the enemy's face, improve my hand. Attack the enemy's face, improve my hand. If I had only good cards, then my hand went from good to great. So this is something that I feel very strongly that Discerning Thief is a pretty good card. I think ooh, she's common too. Very easy to get premium versions of her, because I know that her premium version has like shiny bottle. Where is that shiny bottle at? Oh, we should just look at the premium versions. Why even look at it? Okay, and so worst case scenario is you get 3 Magic at 3/4 and she never pilfers. Acceptable. That's very good. I still think this is very good. Middle case scenario, Discerning Thief is 3/4. She pilfers once, and she's able to improve your hand by 1 card. I think best case scenario is when you start she generates card advantage. So like, improving your hand and getting rid of dead cards like Wild Incarnate, etc. There can be more dead cards. Like you can have cards that are tech choices that are really good in some matchups, maybe like a Fireball that aren't going to be so useful against control, throw it away. Because you can play this in Battle Mage, for example. You might have Firebolts to trigger Breton Conjures. And the best case scenario is when you take that Crown Quartermaster's Dagger and you get a card. You take your Manic Jack, you take one card, or you take you take one card and you turn it into 2 cards. That's when her best case scenario. So she's good in every single category. Worst case scenario, middle case scenario, best case scenario. Black Worm Neophyte. Imperial 4/3, summon, consume a creature, summon a 1/1 skeleton with its keywords. Okay, so first, before we talk about those cases, I can tell you a little anecdote, a story. My opponent played this card as a Necromancer, consumed a Territorial Viper, and summoned a 1/1 skeleton with charge and lethal. And I was like, wow, that card's amazing! It's a 4 Magicka Territorial Viper, or Dirty Necromancer for Viper, and it's got a slightly better attack. And it's 2 Magicka cheaper. Now in the same game, he played a second Blackworm Neophyte, and he was like, oh shit, I don't have a Territorial Viper in my grave, because it consumed the Territorial Viper. So there was a moment where he played this card his second time, and I was like, well, I lost a game, or something like that. Because like if he had a Territorial Viper at the time, Territorial Viper, I think he might have stabilized or something. But then he like was looking desperately in his grave for his Territorial Viper, like, wait, I played a Territorial Viper earlier. Where is it? And he's like taking so long looking at his grave, and I'm just thinking, oh, it's Territorial Viper, it's Territorial Viper. And he's like, oh, there's no Territorial Viper. 1/1 card. So the Blackworm Neophyte is amazing when he pulls out the Territorial Viper for the first time. But the problem is it banishes the Territorial Viper to the Shadow Realm. So unlike Odurnian Necromancer kind of like, it's more expensive, but brings back Viper, and he uses it, and then you always have that Viper option. Like, it's like unlimited ammunition, barring things like Memory Wraith, right? Or other banished effects. But just be careful when you're playing Blackworm Neophyte that it literally banishes the creature. So you need to be careful about this kind of play. But I think it's very good, and like, we can kind of talk about that. So the worst case scenario is you're going to have, the worst case scenario is it's 4 Magicka. You're probably going to, usually for these 4 Magicka, like mid-game kind of consume cards, you're going to have bodies in the discard pile that you can consume. And if you don't, you could always just not play it. Because if there's no bodies in the discard pile, then you're probably not under any pressure, or your hand's so bricked that you're going to lose anyway. It's one of those. So when you when you play this card, you can basically consume a creature. So that's granted. So the worst case scenario is it's going to generate a 1/1 skeleton that has no keywords because you consumed a creature that didn't have any keywords. So at that case, you're getting 5/4 worth of stats for 4 Magicka, which is below par because 4 Magicka in 2 bodies. So 4 Magicka should give you a Bleak Coast Troll 5/5 with Slay. That's like the best in class. Always compare cards to the best in class, and then see, okay, how does this compare to that? And I think in the worst case scenario, it is certainly worse than the worst case scenario of a Bleak Coast Troll. A 1/1 body with no keywords and a 4/3 is a little awkward. They don't exactly scream that they trade very nicely into things. And a Bleak Coast Troll with like a Ward Crafter, which is a very common play, would make you a sad person because the Bleak Coast Troll could have been played in field lane, right? Let's say they played a Bleak Coast Troll in field lane and you play Blackworm Neophyte in the field lane, and then they're like, wow, well, Ward Crafter, boom, I'm gonna eat your 4/3 and leave you with a 1/1. And I got Slay, so I'm now a 6/6. So that's a problem. Middle case scenario, let's just say you're going to get a keyword. So what kind of keywords are popular in blue? Well, Ward is unique to blue. So unfortunately, if you consumed a Ward Crafter with this, I don't believe you're going to get Ward because Ward Crafters don't have Ward. They give Ward. So you got to be careful. It won't get Ward if it ate a Ward Crafter. It would get Ward if it ate a Breton Conjurer. It would get Ward if you ate a Windkeep Spell Sword. That's purple. So you might get Ward, but is 1/1 Ward really good? Because like Ward's good, but on a 1/1 body, what are you gonna tickle? Are you gonna slap items on the 1/1 skeleton? Does Black Worm Neophyte scream I'm in a Covenant skeleton deck or item deck? Not exactly. So this is a little awkward. So Ward usually is good, but not so good here. Barrow Stalker has Drain and Guard, but is 1/1 Drain relevant? Not really. Because it's like the attack is so little that it's just like not much. But Guard could be relevant, but it's still a little bit. It's like a 1/1 guard. It's really a jump block. It's literally I'm blocking you, I'm not killing you, I'm just stalling you. So that's the middle case scenario. Kind of. So then the best case scenario is literally Territorial Viper. As far as I know, Territorial Viper is probably the best card with this. And you could say Old Velafia Assassin is pretty decent because Old Velafia Assassin is a 2-drop, very popular, rally and lethal. It would give your 1/1 2 good keywords. The lethal part makes it dangerous. The rally part makes it something your opponent can't ignore and a value generator. So Old Velafia Assassin is a pretty good best case scenario as well. And more practical because Territorial Viper is a 4-drop as well. So it's kind of weird. If you're under pressure, that means this is kind of going to be played on turn 5 as a floating Magicka. So Territorial Viper is amazing because if you consume a Territorial Viper, you basically get a Territorial Viper back. But that is kind of contingent on you having the Territorial Viper engraved in the first place. So that is a little bit of a downside in its best case scenario. But in that case, you would get a cheaper Odurnian Necromancer, which costs 6 Magicka. And 6 Magicka, 3/3 Territorial Viper has been a very time-honored play. So 4 Magicka for 4/3 is certainly better than that. It's just a little bit harder to pull off. Unfortunately, I don't think this card has the best synergies with other cards right out of the gates. It's not like, even though it's a skeleton, this skeleton's not going to synergize with skeleton decks off the bat, for example. I do like the card art very much. So this card is kind of a card that I would not... I would actually think that Cartel Arcanist is slightly better. Because it's possible. When we talk about these cards, okay, all these cards can actually achieve massive value. It's about the player needs to squeeze as much value out of each of the cards he plays. But when you're building your decks, you want to put in the cards that are the easiest to get maximum value. So like it's possible to get a crazy good Black Worm Neophyte. Maybe that 2 Magicka you saved is relevant because out of 10 Magicka you're able to not only play Black Worm Neophyte but also Odurnian Necromancer. So maybe you're able to play Odurnian Necromancer, bring back Territorial Viper, snipe something, and then use Black Worm Neophyte and do the exact same play, consume the same Territorial Viper again. That wouldn't have been exactly that easy to do. While developing 2 bodies could be a really good tempo swing. So when we look and rate cards, it's be careful, like as cards, some cards are indeed better than other cards, but whenever you play these cards, you're just trying to squeeze maximum value. And when we're building decks, you want to put your deck, stack your deck with cards that are easier to find maximum value. So Gout Fang Adept. Khajiit 4 Magicka 2/4 Wax, draw a card, Wayne +1/+1 guard. 4 Magicka. So played on curve, you get Wayne, and it's a 3/5 guard, which is basically slightly worse than Hive Defender by 1 defense. So it's paying that price with the flexibility. So it makes sense that every Wax and Wayne card is slightly worse than its non-Wax Wayne counterparts because it has the flexibility to not only be something else, but also the ability to also get both with Moongate and to re-trigger with Rebellion General. So that's acceptable. So I think in the worst case scenario, played on curve, Wayne, fine, completely fine. Now the middle case scenario, now the worst case scenario of a 4 Magicka draw a card 2/4. This is a little bit, it feels a little expensive. But in its defense, Merchant's Camel is the exact same thing and is a 1/4. And it feels good to play. The only difference between Merchant's Camel is you can dig a little bit deeper and you can choose what you draw, and the other 2 cards can be populated in the grave, which in certain decks can be a benefit. Like throwing away a Zivkin Banelord, for example, is a very good play, because Zivkin Banelord's better played from Necromancer than played from hand. So I think Goutfang Adept on the Wayne side is basically compared to Hive Defender. Wax side, you're comparing it to a Merchant's Camel. So I think it's playable on both fronts, because Camel is worse statted, and while it's true it does not dig as deep, it ultimately does the same thing, because the Merchant's Camel's real power is to draw a card. Now the middle case scenario, like let's say you got paid 4.5 Magicka for both abilities, because the Moongate is 1 Magicka for 2 uses, so 0.5 gives you half a use, or 1 use. So Goutfang as 4.5 gives you a 3/5 guard that draws you a card. Seems kind of, it seems awkward when you're talking about it, but when you make the comparison to Camel and Hive Defender, it seems fairly acceptable. Now let's talk about the best case scenario. Rebellion General comes into house. So we use the Moongate first. Moongate triggers Goutfang's Adepts, Wax and Wane, and then we play Rebellion General perhaps on the following turn with the other Moongate. So that would be, first of all, you get the 3/5 card, draw card. We just talked about that. And then you get a 4/6 guard, draw card. Seems interesting. I love drawing cards. It should be noted that the 2 attack on this creature makes it possible to use Odurnian Necromancer to bring it back. So some players may feel like, well, 2 attacks not a lot, but when you're looking at OD Necro, I don't know what it's in. Necro. The Necromancer says summon a creature from your discard pile with less power than a Necromancer. So 2 is less than 3, so this allows you to bring back. So there are a number of cards that are actually, like Dark Harvester, for example, might be, alright, okay, so Dark Guardian's 2/5 stat line can become relevant because Necromancer can bring it back, because it's a 2 attack. So when you look at 2 attack, it's actually an advantage when you're talking about Necromancer, because Necromancer brings it back. Dark Harvester is another example. It's a 7-drop 2/4, and you might say that's horrible. And yes, it can be very horrible played from hand. This is the kind of card you want Camel to throw in the grave, and you take advantage of the 2 attack to just kind of bring it back with a Necromancer. That's actually also true about there's the Battle Mage dude that I don't have. Battle Mage dude also has 2 attack, which allows Necromancer to bring it back, and I think that's Covenant colors only. So Merrick at Aswala, you might say, well, 2/2 sucks, but what if I told you Necromancer brought him back? Then you're talking about a lot of value. We are going to continue. So I think I've not really played with that card except for questing, but I feel like this card deserves a shot. And it's certainly welcome to the Waxwing package because it does useful things. Guards and drawing is pretty useful. And the 2 cards we compared it to, Hive Defender and Camel, are like amazing cards. Let's see if we get another song. Alright, so I talked about this card forever in my original, so I'll try not to talk about it too much. 4 magicka, Grave Grasp. Action, Prophecy, Shackle an enemy creature, summon a 1/1 skeleton for each enemy creature in its lane. So, worst case scenario is that you play it from hand, you shackle 1 creature, and there's only 1 creature in the lane, so you get a 1/1. So, it's worse than a Harpy, because a Harpy is a 2/1, and it shackles a creature for half the magicka. So worst case scenario, this thing is completely outclassed by Harpy, because Harpy is a better body, double the attack, it's half the price, it also has Prophecy, but the Prophecy in the worst case scenario doesn't matter because we're playing from hand, and it also shackles. So, on worst case scenario. Middle case scenario is there are more than 1 thing on the body, 1 thing on that lane. So if there are like 3 creatures on the lane, you get 3 skeletons. I think paying 1 magicka for 1/1 is a little bit expensive, since things like 1 magicka for the 2/2 is a thing, and that's a 1 magicka for potentially a 3/3 on Midnight Trespasser. So we should value 1/1s as worth less than 1 magicka, is what I'm trying to get at. So let's say each 1/1's worth half a magicka. So if you got 3, then it's like 1.5. And then let's say 1.5. So then you get the shackle. So let's count shackle as 1 magicka. So then it's like 2.5 magicka. If you get 3 skeletons, it's 1.5 magicka. It's shackle, it's 2.5 magicka. So it's definitely, you're overpaying for what you're getting, especially if there's no skeleton synergies in the middle case scenario. In the middle case scenario, you can make an argument that maybe these are 2/2s. So let's say we got 2/2s because we have the skeleton champion on board. So if you got 3 2/2s, I will value each 2/2 as 1 magicka, so that's 3 magicka, and then the shackle as 1 magicka, so that's 4 magicka. So then you break even if that is the case. So that's a little unfortunate. So this is an example of a card that can get massive value, but its downsides are, its worst case scenario is pretty bad. Its middle case scenario is like, in order to get break even, as in getting you paid 4 magicka and you get 4 magicka worth of what you're paying for, is like you're stretching for it. It's like you have to work for it. It's a little bit tough because there are cards that you do not need to work for at all to get 4 magicka value. Case in point, Emperor's Blade. You just slap them on the ground. Edict of Azura. You just shoot something out of the sky. So there are cards that get full value or more than 4 magicka worth. Just play from hand every single time. So that's why you will see this card see very limited play. Now the best case scenario is that it got triggered on a prophecy. Someone broke a rune and you got this baby free. I think that's a game-winning. This is a game-winning prophecy. This is the kind of prophecy, if it got hit, oh boy, the game got much, much harder for your opponent. So it's certainly a powerful prophecy. What if you play this with Assassin Beetle? There's a card in green that actually lets you play a prophecy from your hand. And this card has been making me... this card has actually been pretty good. Like, this card has been showing me that it can do work. Like, Assassin Prophecy is a thing. Like, there are like 2 different Assassin Prophecy decks I've seen, and one's a control deck and one is an aggro deck. And the control deck still blows my mind how it works. I still have to like reverse engineer it. I have the footage. I haven't really analyzed it, but it had Belizara's tinkering or something. It like kept on transforming creatures, but it was really weird. But it was very powerful. Like, it out-controlled one of my strongest control decks. Wait, I was so confused. I was so confused how that was possible. But this card could synergize with Zed. And then the aggro variant's actually impressively fast. So that Assassin Beetle thing is no joke. But I don't think Grave Grasp is the best prophecy for it to like play, but it could make it possible. And we're talking about an Assassin Prophecy deck, and I think this could be a prophecy to be put in that deck. It's pretty game changing because Shackle and putting on 4 damage on board is a lot of damage. Especially in a racing situation. Like taking out, decommissioning a threat, and then putting 4 bodies. Like they can't, in some cases if it's a board trading thing, they cannot effectively trade into 4 1/1s. And then if you buff those 1/1s, that can just put it over the top, right? With things like, she doesn't buff them, she gets buffed by skeletons. Okay, well, I think this card is a little lackluster. It's very hard. It's hard to get value out of. But in the best case scenario, which is the best case scenario is very hard to control because we're talking about a prophecy that gets triggered from a prophecy onto a lane that has 4 creatures, and then Shackle's the biggest one that hasn't even attacked yet, and then sets up lethal for you on the crackback. That's a lot of ifs. It's like if. Okay, great. It's amazing if. Imbued Breton, 5 Magicka 5/5 ward. When Imbued Breton is consumed, give the consuming creature +1/+1 ward. So if said Neophyte ate that, and that's another thing I forgot actually, Neophyte, if it consumed certain cards, like Argonian, it would not only, I totally forgot. It would actually get buffed, and certain things that you consume, such as if you use 4/3 kind of aggressively, not only to summon a 1/1, but if you consume the Ill-Fated Scholar, it's 4 Magicka for a 4/3, a 3/2, and a 1/1, which comes out to be 5/3, 5/4, 8/6. 4 Magicka for 8/6 stats on 3 bodies. That could be a crazy play. I completely forgot about it. This is the same thing. It could consume this and buff the Skelly. Imbued Breton as a consume card. I've lost to this card, but not to this card, but this card. Like when I've lost to that card, it wasn't because that card was played. It was because this card was played. So when you're looking at the consume package, Ruined Shambler is is analogous to the sort of the Rebellion General. This is the card that consume probably has the strongest consume card. What it does is it basically eats a lot of creatures and it gets really jacked. So playing Ruined Shambler, I know that's not very descriptive, but you could playing Seeker of the Black Arts and Ruined Shambler with cards like this, you're actually not hoping to play Imbued Breton. You're actually hoping that Imbued Breton's at the top of your deck and you just discarded it and consumed it. That's the kind of card it is. So it's not like a card you're excited to play it from hand, but it's certainly a card that you get excited when you discarded it with the Ruined Shambler's ability. Ruined Shambler, we can read it real quick. We can read both their abilities because these 2 cards kind of are very integral to consume. And the consume package seems most strongest in the sorcerer colors. So Seeker or the warrior colors, I believe those are the 2 colors. So Seeker of the Black Art says discard the top 3 cards of your deck. Very important. It gives you more bodies to consume. Or Ruined Shambler, discard the top 3 cards of your deck, then consume all creatures that entered your discard pile this turn. Ruined Shambler gains +1/+1 for each consumed creature. So if you break this down into 3 different sentences. First of all, it throws away cards from the top of your deck on its own. Then it eats all cards that entered your discard pile, which includes the 3 cards that you discarded, and includes things that Seeker of the Black Arts discarded, and includes things that died in battle. So if you traded something in and it died, including said Breton who has ward, so if she somehow died in battle, then the Ruined Shambler would then eat her and get the effect of consume, get ward +1/+1. So then this thing can let's give you a best case scenario. It's this thing attacks, pilfers, discards 3 cards. This thing, let's just say the Breton thing dies, you just trade it and it dies or something. Okay, Then you play this card. So first of all, he's a 1/1, discards 3 cards, and he becomes 4/4. Then he gets +1/+1 or +2/+2 from the Breton and Ward. So he's a 6/6 with Ward. And then he gets, casual +3/+3 because this thing discarded 3 cards. So now it's, 4 magic and 9/9 Ward. Oh, and by the way, let's see what are the 3 cards he managed to eat. He ate a crocodile, so you draw a card. And he ate a ill-fated scholar, so you, just pop out a 3/2. And let's say the other card doesn't do anything. So this is the high roll. This is the 4 magicka, 9/9 Ward, draw a card, and you generate a 3/2. Now, I've definitely lost to this kind of thing. And it also goes for the saying, let's say the Breton Breton thingy, I don't know what this thing is, the Breton guy died, or didn't die, wasn't traded, but was rather discarded from the top, you'd also get that bonus. You get that benefit. So that's what I'm talking about. You would like to see this card as one of the cards that Ruined Shambler discarded from the top of, or the Pilfer lady got through. Our word choices is a little bit off because we had a long day and we're hungry. We're very hungry. So, you know what I'm talking about. Alright, so I feel like worst case scenario is you played this from hand. And you got exactly what you get, and you don't use the consume. Worst case scenario is you got a 5 magicka, 4/4 Ward, and you do not play the consume. And you get things like Fell the Mighty or Javelins. Okay, that's pretty much the worst case scenario. Middle case scenario is that you play this card and it gets consumed by one of these cards like Drum Mothra Reaper, consume a card. So this becomes a 3/3 for consuming, but it would become a 4/4 Ward. So it would be a 2-drop 4/4 Ward if it consumed said thing. So that's kind of the middle case scenario. The best case scenario is what I talked about in detail, this sort of Seeker of the Black Cards, Ruined Shambler combo. So that's certainly the best use case I can see. Vastari, High Elf. Fill this lane with 1/1 skeletons. 5 magicka, Vastari has +1/0 each friendly spirit and skeleton. So she becomes a 4/4 because fill this lane means 3 other skeletons. So 3 skeletons means +1/+0, +3/+0, excuse me. So she's a 4/4 for 5, and you get 3 bodies. So you're basically getting 7/7 worth of stats for 5, with the downside of Vastari becoming a 1/4 if all her skeletons somehow got ice stormed, debilitated, firestormed. No one really plays that card. I don't understand why people don't play that card. I thought that card was amazing. When I saw Firestorm, I was like, wow, this is the card I wish I had. It might not be as amazing now with Elfique Conjures in the meta, but I don't think Firestorm is played as much as it should be. It looks amazing. Like, it is good for what it does, and it's a prophecy, and it's playable. But you don't really have to be afraid of it because people don't play it. So, how do we feel about Vastari? So, worst case scenario is you get Firestormed. So you played 5, you presented a nice threat, and kabow, you got a 1/4. But she can get buffed up again if you start playing other skeletons. So it's not like she just gets buffed from the skeletons she summoned. She can get buffed from the future skeletons you're playing. So she has that upside, so she goes from 4/4, and if you play more, let's say you have 7 other skeletons, because that's the maximum, right? One lane is fully full of skeletons, and then you get 3 skeletons, so 7 skeletons. So then she becomes an 8/4. So she has the potential to become an 8/4. I'm not convinced she's what you want in the skeleton deck, but it does seem like you would take her anyway, just because she generates skeletons. So like when I say she's not what you want in a skeleton deck, even in it really buff Vastari might be cool and all, but you kind of want the skeletons. You'd rather, like, if she had ability that buffed skeletons, you'd rather have that. You're kind of putting too much stats in a Vastari, and I think you're putting too much attack in her. But to be fair, she is a threat, and she puts your opponents into kind of a dilemma. Do you answer the skeletons or do you answer her? And generally they have to answer the skeletons first before they answer her because she's kind of big. But if they answer the skeletons, then she's weakened. Then if you put on more skeletons, then she's stronger. In my experience, she does not survive combat very long. So the middle case scenario is all her bodies, I assume, yeah, I would say the middle case scenario is all her bodies stick and she can get an attack in. All of them can attack. I think that's actually pretty astounding. That's 7 damage, which, so her middle case scenario is quite good. Her worst case scenario is not too bad because they did have to answer it, and if they did answer it, they're probably leaving something up. Ice Storm even lets her survive, for example. The reason why her middle case scenario is all her skellies survive and they attack is not the best case scenario, is because best case scenario is when she starts synergizing with your other skeleton champions and her skeletons start getting more additional stats. And now, let's say they all got buffed by the skeleton champion. She's no longer representing just 7 damage, she's representing 10 damage, which is literally 1/3 of their life. And that's something I think people haven't figured out about skeleton decks is what's the timing, what's the speed? Because skeleton decks seem a little bit like they have cheap bodies, they go wide, but their finishing power doesn't really come online until Skeletal Champion and Bone Colossus. And they don't exactly trade amazingly well, but they do have guards. Like they have 3 Magicka 2/5 that's got great stats. So sometimes I think one of the things that's kind of confusing or making skeleton decks a little bit hard to pilot is they don't have the whole, Mournful Trader, Corner Club Gambler, Young Mammoth, Bleak Coast Troll, go face, kill them. Or they don't have the assassin throw everybody into Shadow Lane and just go underneath them and then, sacrifice my creatures with my House Kinsmans and then use lightning bolts. Like, it doesn't have the same cadence to it. So I think it needs to be played a little bit differently, because if you're putting things like Bone Colossus in your deck, you're essentially a mid-range deck, Like, you're going to have mid-range. And if you're going blue, shouldn't you have Alfie Conjurers and Temple Conjurers? So there's a little bit of a confused identity with Skeleton, like how many actions to pack, do I bring in Channeled Storms, do I bring Ice Storms? Like, that doesn't make sense, because I go wide, so if I bring Ice Storms, I just annihilate my own board. So I think Skeleton-based decks are guard-based, body-based, and I think they're setting up 2-turn lethal clocks. At least that's my perception, having played against Skeleton decks that were effective, and not having Skeleton decks myself, because I don't have enough Bone Colossus. I only have 1, but I feel like when you play that deck, maybe 2 Bone Colossus is good, and then 3 Alfie Conjurers, maybe 2 Temple Conjurers, and maybe even putting 3, maybe putting in 3 of the Reflective Automatons a good idea, because Reflective Automatons count as skeletons, and they also count as Aetronox. So that would be, I would imagine that it's a pretty good inclusion. So then these babes can get you value for the Storm Aetronox while also getting buffed from your skeleton synergies. So I think that would be. I haven't seen skeleton decks really put this card in, but just thinking about it, I think it works. But I imagine that deck as a 50-card deck is very stacked, so it's like very tough, and you need to make good cuts. So like it might be tempting to put 3 Bone Colossus, but when I'm just theory crafting, I think 2 Bone Colossus is enough, because these Bone Colossus, it's expected that the game kind of ends with 1. You're not expecting the game go long enough to do 2. And you'd probably rather see Alfie Conjurer, and if you stack your deck with 3 Alfie Conjurers and then 3 Bone Colossus, you're going to brick. I think you'll brick yourself. I mean, basically with 3 Alfie Conjurers and 2 Bone Colossus, you might even be saying no to every other top end. Like, no Mighty Conjuring, no blah blah blah, and you're just tightening up. Your win conditions are a little bit fewer cards, but higher impact, and then allows you to survive to that win condition. And it's also worth noting there's a card that draws you any skeleton or spirit, making 3 Bone Colossus kind of not necessary. So like the draw skeleton, like this thing, Wake the Dead, draw a spirit or skeleton of your choice from your deck and give it +1, +0, +0, +1. This is basically what you use on Bone Colossus. So with several copies of this, I don't know how many copies, maybe 2 of, it seems like a 2 of kind of card, but a 2 of this kind of card basically gives you additional access to Bone Colossus. Our beloved, we got 3 more and we can eat our supper, because we already ate dinner. It's not dinner time. It's pretty late. I'll be right back. Let me wash my hands, because Alfie Conjure deserves some special time. Alright, so I have something interesting to show people. So Alfie Conjure 6 Magica Khajiit. So it's not, this is not the Alfie Conjure. This is the Atronach. The Alfie Conjure is the cat. So the cat is a wizard. It's a wizard cat that conjured this thing. Just in case you didn't know that, because it's a Khajiit. 3/4. This card is being nerfed on Friday to behold a 3/3. So the only thing changing about this card is its toughness is going to 3. So it's a 3/3 card. Yeah, on Friday. Summon, consume a creature to summon a Flame Atronach. A Flame Atronach is a 4-drop, 5/3. I'm sure everyone who's played TESL recently has seen a lot of this. And if you consumed, because it consumes on summon, an Atronach, instead summon a 6-drop Storm Atronach 7/5 ward. So the nerf on this card basically makes it ice stormable, because originally if this card was played and you generated the Flame Atronach, only the Flame Atronach would die on Ice Storm, because this had 4 toughness, so Ice Storm does 3 damage, so this would survive. Now if they don't trigger the Storm Atronach, both of them would get wiped by the Ice Storm, which I do think is a good change. I kind of feel like it's not enough. I kind of feel like Alfie Conjure could get toned down a little bit more, maybe like a 2 attack. Maybe I don't know about losing guard. I don't know if losing guard is what it needed, because in some cases the guard was like, oh, at least he put it in Shadow Lane so I could at least answer the Alfie Conjure. So I do think Alfie Conjure was quite a powerhouse. So this is the most powerful card in TESL right now, and it may still be the most powerful card following Friday's nerf. We'll have to see whether that nerf really is enough to dethrone it. Okay, so we'll talk about the worst case, the mid case, and the best case scenario, but I'll show you something. So we play Alfie Conjure decks and non-Alfie Conjure decks. So I'm just going to talk about this so for example, we are on our quest for top 10 this month, and God willing, we will make it. but if we look at my past games, Scout is one of my favorite decks. So we played Scout as a counter. This deck got us to rank 8, rank 12, rank 8 and rank 12. It like floated us to rank 8 and 12. Okay. But when we stopped playing it, it got us to rank 12. And that's when we busted out the Dominion. So our Dominion went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 8 wins in 9 games. Alfika Conjure was in lots of these games, not just played by us, but against us. As you see, this is a Dominion mirror, Dagoth. So look how many decks are blue. Blue, 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 no blue, blue, no blue, blue, blue. So in 9 games, 7 games had blue on my opponent's side. So most of these decks play Alfika Conjures. Our deck has 3 Alfika Conjures as well. Did Alfika Conjure win me every single game? No, absolutely not. But it definitely won me games. And I'm pretty sure I lost to an Alfika Conjure. No. Jelly, it was a Hand of Dagoth. Queen Baron Zaya. Belligerent Giant. It was not a Dagoth. I have a tendency to remember my losses because I want to learn from them. Right, so I'm using this, so I was countering Alfik, so I was playing against Alfik's also on my Scout deck. You can see blue, 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 blue. So we like to play Scout, as Scout was kind of our anti-meta deck, and it was kind of our homebrew that was quite good. It had a good matchup. Like you can see it beat Dominion, beat blue, beat Battle Mage, beat blue. So it could be blue. In fact, the decks it was losing to before we switched were not blue decks. These were counter decks to Alfik. So Alfika Conjure has been so instrumental in the meta because you're either a deck that counters Alfik, you are Alfik. You're either one of those two. You either counter Alfiks or you are Alfik. And there are decks that counter Alfiks, as evidence. So this monk deck probably counters Alfik. This archer deck probably counters Alfik. This assassin deck probably counters Alfik as well. It's just not. There are decks that are blue that don't actually run Alfik. Because the philosophy many people have is to go underneath Alfik, but I think it's also possible to go over the top of Alfik. And that's kind of why I'm showing this, is because my Scout deck goes over the top of Alfik, whereas my Dominion deck decides to join the forces of darkness and be an Alfik. Alright, so that should give some meta snapshot context on this card. It's, for everyone who's playing in high tier, you will know that this is the card that is shaping the meta. Okay, so I'll start with an embarrassing story. I've played this card when there was nothing in the grave. And when you do that, you literally get a 6-drop 3/4, because you need to have something in the grave to consume. So check your graveyard, make sure there's a creature in there before you play this card. So that's a pretty easy condition to meet. It's basically like if you didn't mess up like I did, and you just looked at your grave, you can tell easily, oh, can I play this card? Oh, if I can't, then I'll just wait, right? And by 6 magic a turn, it's pretty common for there to be a card in your grave. And Graveyard Banish is not too common in the current meta. I've seen people experimenting with Memory Wraith and certain banished cards, even today, trying to counter Alfik, but I don't think this is ever going to catch on as mainstream because Ebonheart Slay and other kind of recursion decks aren't very dominant, so it doesn't seem to be a big deal. So Consume kind of doesn't get... Consume's not something that gets countered very easily at the moment. So getting a Flame Atronach online is usually the worst case scenario. So you're going to get 5/3, so that would be 8/7 worth of stats. So 6-drop 8/7. So I said if I paid 6 magic for 8/7 on 2 bodies, 1 gets guard and 1 gets breakthrough. That's 2 keywords, 2 bodies, above average. So 8/7 is the same thing as, did I say 8/7? Yes. 8/7 is better than a 7/7, which is basically you want to be at least that one attack and 1 defense stat above what you're paying for, and Alfie Conjure is able to do that with consistency, high consistency. And I think this is what makes this card so good. Its worst case scenario is crazy good. Its worst case scenario is better than many cards' best case scenario. So it's very easy to find maximum value on this. Before the nerf on Friday, it dodged Ice Storm. The Ice Storm would kill one body, but leave this, basically. I mean, that's relevant, right? If your Ice Storm... This is going back to the idea of how many cards does it take to answer my card. Alfie Conjure is a card that requires more than one card to answer, and I think that's why it's so powerful. It's like, I played Alfie Conjure 3-4 and my 5-3. You Ice Storm, you killed the 5-3, but my 3-4 is still there. So what's up? He's gonna hit you. Now you have to use another card to kill the Alfie Conjure, because chances are you didn't even have a... If you used Ice Storm, you hit your own creatures with Ice Storm too. So during that Ice Storm turn, you weren't developing any creatures, so you're falling behind on tempo. And this is the thing, if Alfie Conjure is not answered by a single card, it puts your opponent in the driver's seat to actually take control of the game with things like Belligerent Giants. Basically, they can get the tempo and they'll never give it back. Because like that 1-3-1 that survives could stick for a while and keep on hitting you in the face while you're struggling to answer with your additional threats. Like, let's say they put a Belligerent Giant down, you lightning balled it. Well, then that's an Alfie Conjure you're ignoring again. That's actually what made that play so well into Battle Mage's current build. I'm not a believer that Battle Mage is the best deck. I do think Battle Mage is a tier 1 deck, and it's able to beat every other deck. So it has the ability to beat every other deck, but I don't think it's the best deck. So you could say that it's very good, because it has the ability to just take away a win from take a win from anyone. And yeah, Alfie Conjure and its follow-up plays that Battle Mage has access to, like Mighty Conjurings, Belligerent Giants, those things snowball out of control when they have the tempo. Like, Belligerent Giant in some situations actually a really bad card, but in some situations it's game over. Like, if they already have a Doomfang ally that you can't answer, then a Discerning Thief that you can't answer, and then they put on a Temple Conjure that you kind of answered, then they put an Alfie Conjure which you have to answer with 2 cards, then they Belligerent Giant away your answer to their Alfie Conjure. It's like you're only partially, like every single turn they put a threat down and you're only partially answering it. That's when Battle Mage gets the win. Because it's like they Doomfang ally and you're like, wow, crap, my 3-drop can't even contest him because he's got, 3-3 with Ward, and he already played a Crown Quartermaster, so I know he has a dagger in his hand, and oh, by the way, there's like blah blah. So it's like the Battle Mage puts out high quality threats that are difficult to deal with a single card, and Alfie Conjures another one of those cards, and being the best card in the game, it's even better than some of those cards, okay? So that was the worst case scenario. Like, you understand, we're not even talking about the Storm Matriarch. We're only talking, and you know what the scary part is? The middle case scenario is the Storm Matriarch. Teaser, the best case scenario is Luzra. So like, the worst case scenario is you got the Flame Matriarch, alright. Takes me 2 cards to deal with you. Middle case scenario is middle case scenario, let's talk about that a little bit. Middle case scenario is you get the Storm Matriarch, a 7/5. So you 6 Magicka, you get 10-9 worth of stats. 10-9 worth of stats. Excuse me, Dark Seducer is 8 Magicka for 7/7. 8 Magicka for 7/7. 10-9 is literally 5 stat higher. I need to make sure Dark Seducer 7/7. Let's just make sure. I haven't played that card in forever, but I'm pretty sure we are not lying. Yeah, that's an 8 drop for 7/7. So when we're looking at the Storm Matriarch, Houston, we have a problem. Like, this card, you literally put a Dark Seducer in front of this, Dark Seducer will die because Storm Matriarch is 7/5 with Ward. Like, so this card answers an 8 drop that people are afraid of with only half of it. Half of this card answers a Dark Seducer. And oh, they trade. Dark Seducer doesn't even kill or drain it because of the Ward. So that is Alfie Conjurer's middle case scenario. And that is scary, right? The middle case scenario is better than a card that costs even more with half of its ability. Because it's only, you're not even talking about the 3/4 guard, you're just talking about the 7/5 ward. Oh, you could only describe this as a powerhouse. The only real answer to Alfie Conjurer is that you can beat Alfie Conjurer even in this middle case scenario. We can talk about that in detail too, how to beat Alfie Conjurer. You can defeat it by going under. You can defeat it by being Alfie, and you can beat it by going over. I think the hardest the hardest way to beat Alfie Conjurer, it's possible, is to go to play into its strength, as in its mid-range is its strength. Basically, a mid-range deck that has to fight Alfie Conjurers and you don't have Alfie Conjurers, it's probably possible to win that matchup, but it's just not favored, and you better have a really good reason why you're not playing blue. Like, the other colors that you're running need to find maximum value on every single card, turns 1 through 6, to actually stand a chance, because otherwise you're basically hoping that they didn't draw well, which happens. So sometimes we have the illusion that's like, oh wow, we won, but did they draw well? If they didn't draw well and you drew perfect, that could be very helpful in winning, but does that tell you your matchup's better? Probably not, right? So best case scenario is horrifying, and it's getting nerfed, right? But so this card's getting nerfed to 3/3 guard, small nerf. Lazura's nerf is a little bit bigger. Lazura's I saw people on Reddit call her Orc Bay, so I'm gonna call her Orc Bay, but I usually call her Luzzy. We're chums. I used to judge her and think she's a horrible card, but I loved her la da dee da, like the mission in Isles of Madness where you actually have to do the pipes, like the blue, the red, and the yellow. That thing drove me crazy. I don't even know how I beat it. I beat it twice and I still don't know how I beat it, because it was because I beat it for the ordinary and then I beat it for the master, and I don't know. I was just throwing things down. I don't know what the pattern was. I don't know. It's like red, blue, yellow notes, but Lazura, pretty funny character. So Lazura's scary thing is when you summon a creature with 6 costs or more, both Lazura and that creature gain +2/+2. Now, when you put that with Alfie Conjurer, bad things happen. Like, Alfie Conjurer's a 6-drop, right? Sure, if you have the 6-drop with the worst case scenario, the Flame Nature Knock, it only triggers once. So that means Lazura goes from 2/3 to 4/5. And then Alfie Conjurer herself goes from 3/4 to, just 5/6 casual. You're 5/6? Like 3/4 is already hard to deal with. You got a 5/6, but the 5/3 is just 5/3. And that's like the worst case scenario, Luzzy. The best case scenario, Luzzy, is when you put the Storm Nature Knock. The Lazura gets buffed not only for the Alfie Conjurer, but also the Storm Nature Knock. So Lazura goes from 2/3 to 4/5 because of the main, the cat, and then goes from 4/5 to 6/7 because of Storm Nature Knock. The Alfie Conjurer goes from 3/4 to 5/6, and then Storm Nature Knock goes from 7/5 to 9/7. Okay, 9/7. So the dream case scenario is you played these on curve, so that means Lazura was played and she lived the turn before, and on turn 6 this happens. At that stage, game's pretty much over. It's possible to win, but it's pretty close to being over. The sort of second best case scenario is when they're played on turn 8. So that means that is a pretty strong play. It's basically because Lazura played the turn before Alfie Conjurer is a little risky because she can get answered easily, but playing them both on the same turn on turn 8 is literally the most powerful turn 8 I believe anyone could play. And if you don't want to die to Dawn's Wrath, just put them in 2 different lanes. So I think Dawn's Wrath is the best answer, but it's very easy to play around split lanes. So if you calculate that out, we said 6-7, 5-6, and a 9-7. I believe I added this up previously and it was 20-20 in stats. So we'll just check since it's pretty late at night, so let's make sure that's accurate so we don't give false information. 5-6, okay, 9-7. So if we add their attacks, 6 plus 5 is 11. 11 plus 9 is 20. So that's 20 attack. 7 plus 6 is 13. 13 plus 7 is 20. This is 20 attack and 20 defense for 8 magicka. If we look at in 3 bodies, and Lazarik's going to get buffer with, in addition, she's still a value engine. So this is the Lazura of right now. Of course, this is getting nerfed. Okay, it's getting nerfed on Friday to +1/+1. So on Lazura will only give +1/+1 every time a 6 attack power creature, 6 magicka cost creatures put into play. So Lazura would go from 2/3, and then she'd become a 4/5. Wow, she looks so much less. She looks so less scary. So you go for 4/5. Your Alfie Conjurer will go to 4/5, and your oh, that's still strong. So basically, if you played Lazura and then Alfie Conjurer with Storm Atronach today till Thursday, goes from 6/7. She's a 6/7 Lazura, 5/6 Alfie Conjurer, 9/7. 9. Let's look at the premium one to talk about this. 9/7 Storm Atronach. In the current, and after the nerf, it's just a 4/5 Lazura and a 4/5 Alfie Conjurer, and just an 8/6 Storm Atronach. So for anyone who's worried, I don't think they should be worried. This still looks pretty scary. This is 16 defense and 16 attack. So it's just 4 less attack and 4 less defense. That still seems out of control. Because if you look at what 8 magicka does, what does 8 magicka do for you and for anybody else? So Storm Atronach. Okay, let's use Storm Atronach is a 8/8. Okay, Storm Atronach is an 8/8 with the conditional that you have a body on top and it has ward. Okay, so the ward nullifies itself because Storm Atronach has ward. Guard nullifies itself because the Alfie Conjurer has a ward. So for 1 more magicka, you get double. Even after the nerf, you get 16 attack and 16 defense. This is 8 attack, 8 defense for Mighty Conjuring. It is twice a Mighty Conjuring. That's not even 8 magicka though, so let's just be... It's okay. It's Incano. Incano is played all the time. Incano is 5/5. It's just 11 attack and 11 defense more than this. Casual. And in the current mode, it's 15 attack and 15 defense more than this. Yeah, a little bit. So as one who is on the top 10 grind, it's very important, I've found, from a psychological point of view, to look at this. I've played many video games, okay, and many of these video games are broken out of their mind. Okay, in fact, that's how some of these games need to make money. They need to do power creep to make people, like, what's going to make you interested in the next set? What's going to make you interested in the next card? What's going to make you try the new hero or build the new item or blah, blah, blah. So power creep I've already accepted deep in my soul. And as someone who's trying to go to top 10, there's no way you're going to the top 10 without beating this card. You have to beat this card. And if beating this card means playing this card or countering this card or blah, blah, whatever, you have to do what you gotta do. You can't cry. And I think of this also like in like a military context. Like, I kind of play these sort of battle games, strategy games, because I want to. There's a military exercise component to it. So I'll just share what I feel about it. Is that if your opponent came at you with Alfie Conjurers, you can't cry. You have to find a way to beat them. Like, if they brought Alfie Conjurers to your house and they're after you and your family, you gotta use what you got. You can't pray to God and say, like, why did you make Alfie Conjurers so strong? Like, they're already here. The invasion's here. So I'm more for the resourcefulness, because even in real life warfare, right? If your opponent has nuclear bombs and you don't, or if they have air superiority and you don't, or they have war elephants and you don't, or they have rifles and you don't, complaining does not do anything. You're not going to, no one's going to listen to you, no one cares, and they're here to take your life. They're here to take your property. They're here to conquer. So you've got to either invest in the tech to catch up. That's basically what real civilizations do, is they figure out, wow, we're going to get whomped. So if we don't upgrade our military power or whatnot, in our deck building game, it's basically, if you don't upgrade your deck, you're going to get wrecked, son. So I feel like these are very parallel. So that's helped me kind of discard a complaining mentality and basically, okay, I'll conjure, like, accept, gotta beat it, figure it out. So yeah, I think we can talk. We need some water to talk about how do we beat this card. Thinking about this could take some time, because I've been thinking about this card for a long time. Or we can move on and do the other cards and then come back to Elfleet Conjure, because Elfleet Conjure, I don't know, I have no idea how long it will take to talk about different ideas, and feel free to share ideas on how to beat this card as well. I think we'll move on and then we can come back. It just makes more sense because there's just 2 more cards. So Glacial Dragon is a 6-drop 4/5 shackle enemy creatures damaged by friendly dragons. Summon, deal 2 damage to a creature. I think this card is pretty good. It's pretty annoying to play against in the right decks. So when I say it's pretty good, it's absolutely bad in any non-dragon deck. You don't play this in a non-dragon deck. It doesn't work. It's for what it does, it needs to synergize with dragons. Played in a dragon deck, this thing has the ability to stall out and stabilize to reach late game. And I've found that dragon decks can beat Elfleet Conjure decks. So dragon decks are not meme tier, in my opinion. Well constructed, well piloted, they can win. And when I say well constructed, I mean don't just jam every dragon you can. These dragon decks have non-dragon cards in them. There are a lot of non-dragon cards that are very good that you should put in your dragon decks. So, like, you can't go overboard with the dragon tribal and expect it to amaze. This is my first warning, based off of what I've played against. So how do I know this can beat Elfleet decks? Well, I've played Elfleet decks two reasons: using induction and deduction. First of all, I've played Elfleet decks and lost to these dragon decks horrifically, because these decks have a tendency to be Guildsworn, and they have Callan Granted, they have Undying Dragon. So if they're Guildsworn, they have tiny dragons. Tiny dragons. Okay, let's talk about Tiny Dragon for a second. Tiny Dragon. So Tiny Dragon says as a dragon, deal 1 damage to all enemy creatures in the lane. So that's like perfect, but we can look at it for like a little bit longer, just in case someone doesn't know about it that much. So this is a dragon that deals 1 damage. It might seem very lackluster because it's only 1 damage. But when you put it with the card we were just talking about, it literally shackles everybody in the lane, which is pretty annoying for a deck that is trying to go face. Alright. So, like, it says shackle enemy creatures damaged by friendly dragon. So Tiny Dragon deals 1 damage to everybody in the lane. They're all shackled unless they're warded. So the summon, deal 2 damage. This creature shackles a creature the moment it gets played, which is very relevant. And 2 damage isn't completely bad. But the funny thing about Glacial Dragon is you tend to try to play him. It's funny. Sometimes you have to be careful in the lane you're playing it, because sometimes you're playing in a lane that it does not die. So you're playing on the lane opposite where your opponent's threats are, but then you're not making good use of its defensive capabilities. So there are some forward planning to figure out how you're going to defend yourself. Sometimes you need to put it in harm's way, simply because not doing so means you're dying. So I think figuring out where to put this and position it, and where to bait them to what lanes, and what's your follow-up to deal with their threats is important. component of making Glacial Dragon work. So this card doesn't exactly just like work automatically. You have to squeeze value out of it. So the worst case scenario I feel like is you play this in a non-dragon deck, and that's like avoided immediately by not playing it in a non-dragon deck. So like for what it does, like this part wouldn't do very much for you if you had too many non-dragons, but if you have a critical mass of dragons, this thing can play out over and over again and really frustrate even the Alfiq based aggro decks. The deal 2 damage to creature, so it just played for 6 magicka for its stats. Its stat line is a little bit, is definitely below what you want for a 6-drop. So it's not amazing for its stats. So you're relying on this shackling ability to trigger multiple times in order for it to really work. Dealing 2 damage to a creature, it can be big because like if you shackle a creature and then you value trade it into another one, and then you like, so the dream with Glacial Dragon is you shackle a big creature. Like let's say they put 2 threats in the Shadow Lane, a Bleak Coast Troll, and maybe even Alfiq Conjure, okay, and then they triggered the Flame Edge Shock. So you can use the Glacial Dragon to first of all shackle the Bleak Coast Troll, and then you put it in the Shadow Lane in harm's way with backup, because you see in your hand a tiny dragon. So you're like, basically, I'm going to value trade the Conjure, and then I'm going to tiny dragon the whole lane. And I'm not killing the Flame Ancient on purpose, because by leaving it alive, it would prevent them from generating the Storm Ancient should they have a follow-up Alfiq Conjure. That's a way to play around Alfiq Conjures, because actually Alfiq Conjure is really crazy when there's not enough magicka to work with. But if you keep on shackling them, you're buying yourself time to get into a turn that you have more magicka to work with, where you can start to answer multiple threats, and you can do things like board wipes, you can do things like Maroks, you can start getting into a situation where you can make them hurt. So the middle case scenario is, I think you follow this up with very limited sort of shackling, like you're not accessing Tiny Dragon, or maybe you get off, instead of a Tiny Dragon, you're relying on things like Alfiq, not Alfiq. Alright, so it says Dragon. I think Clockwork Dragon is actually pretty good. It belongs in these Dragon decks, because these Dragon decks usually get runes broken like crazy, and then they drain themselves right back. And that's kind of where they fit. And this is an amazing card, by the way, to be playing with that card. Like where the card we just talked about is weak, Cliffside Lookout strong. This card's huge stats. For a 3-drop, this guy gets big, like 4/7 easy. So like these are the kind of cards that make that kind of card okay. So like Undying Dragon drain you back up. So when you're playing Shackle, you need to be shackling you're shackling to a point. You're trying to get to a goal, right? In this case, shackling to Callan Granted is okay. Like shackling, if they get some rune breaks, getting the shackle chain going so that you can survive to these Undying Dragon plays makes it possible where it's like, okay, they're really frustrated. They can't deal with the Shackler. Like if they can't remove the Shackler, you know it's safe for the Undying Dragon to basically like drop on the field and become the stabilization tool. So you're usually trying to just stall to the stabilization tool is what I'll say. Let's try to look for something, but I say the middle case scenario. Oh, I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this dragon. This is also a dragon that synergizes with it. It's a little expensive, but in Guildsworn colors it's playable. Deal 4 damage to enemy creature, and that would shackle them, and deal 1 damage to all enemy creatures. It would shackle them all again. So no one said you had to exactly play this on 6. You could always play this later on turn 8 with another card, and let's say once that sets up this card, you got Frostgale Dragon just shackling them all over again, and then it's like, you can also not just shackle, but you could shackle them into an Ice Storm. I think that's another way. You shackle these cards and then you prep yourself for beautiful Ice Storms, because these dragon decks should run Ice Storm. So I'm kind of using memory, kind of reverse engineering kind of decks I've played against, and trying to explain my thought process on how I see this card being used effectively. So best case scenario, I feel like you're using Tiny Dragon, shackling the whole lane, and then you're stalling to an Ice Storm. Ice Storm's like just clear the board, or make it your opponent's threat density, or not threat density, but their wide boards. You just bringing down the threat level and surviving to your stabilization tools, getting to Undying Dragon. And at that point, these dragon decks are pretty stacked on late game, and you're relying on things like Alduin, Kalangronted, Odavings, maybe even Parthenax in some cases if you run Redoran or Bone Dragons. So Redoran is one, but Redoran can't be used with Glacial Dragon, so that doesn't work. So I think Guildsworn's the one that uses this card the most. Skeletal Mage, our final card. Before we go, we'll have 2 more parts to this review before we stop, and that's talking about. We'll quickly rate all the cards, our speed rating, and then we'll end on our Alfheat Conjure kind of like counters and just talk about that. So Skeletal Mage, 7 magic, a 3/5, consume a creature, deal damage equal to its power to a creature. I remember complaining so much about this card when I first reviewed it. Because I remember losing to it and it made me so mad. Because I was like, why? Like how? Like who puts that card in this your deck? So like Skeletal Mage, consume a creature. So this card is kind of like Incano, but he can't go to the face. He costs 1 less, he doesn't have breakthrough, and he has 2 less attack, and he banishes a creature in your grave, and he usually does less than 5 damage. That's why I don't like this card. Like, all those, and he's a skeleton with, like, probably 0 skeleton synergy, because you can barely fit in 3 Bone Colossus, so putting another 7-drop is like brick. So it's like a skeleton aspect literally doesn't factor in at all. So you're not putting him in skeleton deck. Skeleton deck doesn't want him because skeleton decks go wide and they want to push damage, kill the face. Skeletal Mage is a control card that's a board-based creature that's removing something, but as I said, he's another Incano, but he's smaller and he's usually not doing 5 damage, but sometimes he does way more than 5 damage. Because sometimes you use Merchant's Camels and you dump in, you know, just a Dark Seducer, and then Skeletal Mage just zap 8 damage. Whew. That's how I feel about this card. So the worst case scenario is this card is 1 less Magicka than Incano, 2 less attack, no breakthrough, and he's doing less than 5 damage, and the creature that you're consuming doesn't have enough attack, so you can't even kill the creature that you really want to kill. I think that's where Skeletal Mage is really embarrassing, because it's like you need to have a density of cards of 5 attack or greater for this card to really at least Incano-like damage. I mean, 4 is okay. 4 is doable, because in theory, if you consumed a 4 attack creature, you got Lightning Bolt, you're just sending it to a creature, which makes the 3/5 body a 3-drop. And that's pretty much a Doomfang ally hitting a purple creature. So that is acceptable. It's like a Doomfang plus a Lightning Bolt in 1 card. So you're kind of preserving card advantage, but at the same time, is the 3/5 body really relevant? Because is it like a 3/5 body doesn't have guard? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to like beat them down with this 3/5 guy? Is he a beat stick? I don't really think so. Maybe you should just run the 7-drop Spirit Knife if you really want a control card that does damage, because it actually draws you another card and it does 7 damage. So like, Spirit Knife. Like, this card is actually not as bad as people think. Well, the card art on Premium is cool. This card's pretty good. Like, when you get Spirit Knifed by a guy who's stabilized, you don't feel good about it, because you're just like, wow, wow, I didn't even take a resource from him. Versus Skeletal Mage is kind of like, I have a feeling that if you use the Skeletal Mage, you're getting a 3/5 body, and he just sits there in the lane. Like, he just sits there, like, you just put him in the field lane, and he just zaps something in the shadow lane, and he just sits there, and he doesn't even attack. Makes you think, like, should I be putting this card in your deck? Now, the middle case scenario is you at least consume something with, like, 5 attack, so you're at least at that Incano level, and you're dealing with you're able to deal with a threat. And I think it says the conditional that you have those 5 drops, and you're able to you're able to, your opponent has a card that has the remaining toughness that just the amount that you need to deal with. In that case, it can be good enough. It can be good enough. Now the best case scenario is if you prepared this, you Merchant's Cam will dump things that are really big, and then you consume really big things, and the consume thing that you consumed has some kind of consume synergy. Because remember, consume is a thing, so if you consume, but this is kind of weird, because like if you consumed Ill-Fated Scholar, you're going to get a 3/5 and 3/2, and you only deal 3 damage. Is that worth it? I don't know about that. What are other good targets that you can consume that would be kind of big, but give you something on top of it? So we can search for that. Consume. Well, it wouldn't seem like these colors seem to have anything. Is that a surprise? So the best card to consume is Imbued Breton, because you'd become literally a 4/6 with Ward, and you deal 4 damage. And that's still kind of weird, because like already Imbued Breton doesn't even feel like it fits in a lot of decks. Okay, there is a world I do see this deck. Okay, this could be in a Sorcerer Rune and Shambler deck as like a one-of, and it's just high tempo. It's a high tempo generator. I don't think it's the best choice for it, but I could see that it could be put in a consume deck where there's consume synergies that you already have other consume cards. And the turn, you need to win on the same turn that you play this card. Or you need to win, like, you need to make it impossible for them to not lose the next turn. And so this is an example of a card that I don't think is great, but it can be a game-winning card. It can be a card that you get maximum value out of. You can use this card to remove a critical guard and create a new body in the Ill-Fated Scholar, and it does have an additional consume synergy, so it's not completely hopeless, but it's awfully expensive. And I don't feel good about playing this card, and I just feel like if you have this card in your deck, you can make it like once you have a card like this in your deck, you basically try to figure out how can I make this card do the most for me in this matchup. And that's how you should view all cards in all matchups. Like, because some cards are just amazing in certain matchups, and some are just really bad. And even if you have a card that's bad in your matchup, you can still get as much as you can in that matchup, right? Sometimes Ice Storm's not very good in a matchup, but you can still get a high value Ice Storm, not because of a matchup, because you bait them, or because you wait, or you just create the conditions that make the Ice Storm good. And that's also with Skeletal Mages. You can create a conditions that make Skeletal Mage good enough. So that's my end on Skeletal Mage. So we'll do what we do normally, and that's going to run through them real quickly and say whether they're good and bad from our point of view. Midnight Trespasser, good. Frazzled Afik, good. Khajiit Warhelm, good enough, rare. Wandering Skeleton, like rare to see, so therefore has surprise factor. But be careful, don't put too many in your deck, because it's really just like a combat trick. Wandering Skeleton, good. Especially in skeleton decks, but good enough for non-skeleton decks. Cartel Arcanist, very good in Assassin tempo deck if you can trigger it multiple times, otherwise very bad. Discerning Thief, very good, very playable in pretty much all blue decks, especially aggressive decks and aggressive and mid-range decks. Blackworm Neophyte, sometimes bad, but can pull off really good Territorial Viper plays. So I think it's good enough. But you have to be careful. When I say these things, you need to be careful to see whether this card fits in your particular deck, because when you look at your 4-drops, maybe you have too many 4-drops, or maybe you have 4-drops you'd prefer to play over Blackworm Neophyte. So you need to be careful and compare cards to the other cards you're already looking at, including your deck. So even if a card's good, doesn't mean you actually put it in your deck, because maybe there's a better card or a better choice for your deck, for what your deck's strategy is. Gatfang Adept, this one surprised me, at least this review, because I don't remember calling it good when I reviewed it last time, but I think this card's good. It really is comparable to a Hive Defender and a Merchant's Camel in a single card, and it can be Necromancer back, and it can trigger multiple times. I think this card is a card that, while it may not immediately be easy to get full value out of it, getting full value on this is a very powerful card. It's a very powerful card to get full value on. And if it does not get full value on it, it's very hardy. I talked too much about that card. Ah, bad. I feel like this card's bad. But if there are more consume cards added to the game, Imbued Bren might get the thumbs up. Vistari doesn't scream to be like amazing, but she's good enough. And the skeleton deck, if they don't have enough 5-drops, she can take a place in it. Alfie Conjure, best card in the game. I think it's still going to be the best card in the game, even after the nerfs, just by looking at my... I mean, it's going from... The Lesra play goes from 20-20 stats on turn 8 to 16-16. I think 16-16 stats is still crazy. I think this card's going to get nerfed again. I don't know if TESL had a history of nerfing the same cards over and over again, but I have a feeling that this card's going to get nerfed again, because 3 doesn't sound like a really significant nerf. Lesra probably doesn't need to get nerfed again, but I think Alfie Conjure needs to get nerfed again. Glacial Dragon. I think it's a good card in Dragon decks, a very bad card in non-Dragon decks. But be careful, in those Dragon decks, don't put too many dragons. Put a lot of good cards that are not dragons. Skeletal Mage, bad card, but even bad cards can be used to high efficacy. It's possible to win games with bad cards, because bad cards are not as bad as dead cards. We should make a distinction here. There are cards that are actually dead, and when you're looking at many matchups, there are many matchups where you have a deck that have cards that are very good in certain ones, but they're dead in other matchups. It's okay to have there's a tolerance of dead cards. Like, if your deck was well constructed, it can tolerate having X amount of dead cards. Skeletal Mage is a bad card, but is it a dead card? It's not a dead card. I feel like for what it does, it should be decently useful for what it does, because it's not completely dead. It's not like a card that kills only supports versus a guy that has no supports or something. For example, there are cards like, let's say, support removal. I'm sure that we're looking for some support removal. That is pretty useless. I don't know. There are cards that are just completely useless in some matchups. But I'm trying to think of a good example. I can't think of one at the top of my head at the moment. Maybe support's the wrong word. Maybe if we just look at... Oh, we can look at that at the time. So, I am quite exhausted, but we are going to trooper it out on the final leg. Oh, wow, it's getting late. Alfie Conjure. Hi, why does the season end on 31st? I'm pretty sure it's going to end at the end of Saturday. Pretty sure it's the end of Saturday. Not the... Okay, Alfie Conjure. Consume... Okay. How do we beat this card? How do we go under it? How do we go... Okay. We can talk about going under it, matching it in a kind of mid-range mirror style, and then some control. But we're going to be briefer than normal because we're already exhausted. So a deck that's traditionally done very well, two decks that do really well against Alfie Conjure decks are Crusader Aggro. Crusader Aggro and Empire Aggro. Another example is Assassin aggro with no Afik. So these decks basically can almost kill your opponent by turn 6. The premise is people who play Afik Conjurers have too much faith and confidence in the Afik Conjurers, because Elfie Conjurers is powerful, most powerful 6-drop, okay? But if the game is slated to end on turn 6 to 7, Elfie Conjurer is not a good card, because it cannot react fast enough. Yeah, so Elfique Conjure is so going under it, there are decks that are fast enough and purpose built to take them out by turn 6. So I think when you look carefully at those kind of decks, you'll see, for example, Thuldir won the Master Series and he brought an Empire deck. And Empire doesn't have blue, so non-blue decks can't run Elfiques. These decks can they often rely on things like Mournhold Traders and Corner Clubs, Rift Thanes, Crusaders Assaults. Not really Crusaders Assault's okay, but like Crusaders Assault's not really necessary, but it's helpful. These are the Relentless Raider kind of decks. These are decks that have 1-drops and make very good use of 1-drops. Like Morag Tong Aspirant. So if you want to end the game by turn 6, 1-drops are a pretty good way to start, is what I would say. In the mid-range fight with Elfie Conjure, we can recognize that Elfie Conjure is by nature an aggressive card. It is generally part of the game plan for them. And I forgot to talk about Temple Conjure because I kind of forgot about it, but if you wanted to set up the Storm Atronach fast, the way you do it is you have a Temple Conjure on turn 5. That generates a Flame Atronach. If Flame Atronach dies, now on 6 you have a Elfie Conjure that can generate Storm Atronach. The other way is you play Reflective Automatons. And Reflective Automatons count as Atronach, so you either play them in the field or you discard them with Discerning Thieves, and then you consume them with the Elfie Conjure. So I think, okay, one of the ways you beat them, let's say you're the mirror, is to have things like Reflective Automaton. If their Elfie Conjure is the Flame Atronach one and yours is the Storm Atronach one, you're positioning yourself to win. And you're going to be able to do that by adding things like Reflective Automatons and a higher density of Temple Conjurers and committing to that game plan. So being more committed to the Storm Atronach and getting it faster is one way. Because some people just run 3 Elfie Conjurers and their first Elfie Conjure is their Flame Atronach and the second Elfie Conjure is the Storm Atronach, so they're not as committed as someone who has 3 Discerning Thieves, 3 Temple Conjurers, 3 Reflective Automatons, and they have multiple ways to make sure that Elfie Conjure is having the maximum chance to get that Storm Atronach. Another way to win that mid-game fight is to be dual color. So if your opponents are tricolor Elfie Conjure decks, they have a harder time finding their Elfie Conjure pieces. So if you're dual color, you'll be 50 cards, so that your probability of finding your cards you need is even greater. So you're going to have over 100 games, you'll see Alfiq Conjure become the Storm Atronach even more. So these are about probability, like you're trying to increase the chances of a Storm Atronach, and you're trying to increase the chances of your Alfiq Conjure being found on curve, or your Temple Conjure into Alfiq being found on curve, or Luzra into Alfiq Conjure. 50 card decks find these pieces even faster. So these have all pointed at Battle Mage becoming one of the Battle Mage and Sorcerer and Mage are the three that shine the brightest in the mid-range, and they all have different advantages. For example, Battle Mage has has Ice Frost Atronachs that can come from the Bren Conjurers. Those can be eaten by the Alfiq Conjurer. You have Belligerent Giants to counter the Storm Atronach. If their opponent's Storm Atronach, you could send it back to their hand, and that's such a high tempo play that usually if they play the Storm Atronach from hand, they might have lost, because you're already doing bad things to them. You're using Harpies to stop that Storm Atronach. So you can basically decommission their Storm Atronachs. That's one way of doing it. Like, you don't need to fight them head on. You don't need to let that ward become relevant. If you set up lethal, keep bouncing it, and you shackle it, and then you start getting more damage in, and then you force them into a bad racing position. Alfiq Conjurer can be very bad for playing from behind because it's aggressive. It's not and people who play Alfiq Conjurer decks might have more aggressive tools than defensive tools and less recovery tools, and therefore if you race them in the correct way, or if your deck is better built for racing, then you can punish them. And that's actually something that we do with our Dominion deck. Our Dominion deck doesn't take advantage of the 50 card part, it takes advantage of our superior racing abilities. Other mid-range tactics, so Mage's advantage over Battle Mage is it has hard removal, it has javelins, and it has high prophecy density. So Guildsworn and Mage. So Mage is kind of like the trimmed down Alfiq Conjure, where we're committed to the Alfiq Conjure plan, but we have prophecies, and those prophecies are going to tip the edge because we'll force them into a racing situation, and we're not going to hit prophecies, and they will, because a single javelin will end them, especially if it's mirror. So you're both mid-range Alfiq decks, but we have got a javelin coming out from the heavens, and you've got nothing. That's one, because they can run like 18 prophecies. Battle Mage can run like 6. That's 3 times the prophecy count. Also, Mage has more drain. Battle Mage has no drain. So they did these little things, right? So Golden Initiates can facilitate racing situations, which comes into play for Dominion, right? Because Dominion uses Mage colors with green, and Drain and the Dominion Battle Reeves are a major, and the Dominion Oathmans are a major component of how we are able to overcome our opponents. Sorcerer is an interesting one, because Sorcerer of that family of those 3 Alfiq decks, Sorcerer comes in the picture and says, I'm going to go a little bit lighter, but I'm going to go a little bit thicker. So they're going to bring in the big boys, the War Elephants, the Trolls, the Barrow Stalkers, the Skinned Hounds, the Sorcerer's Negations. Their ability to fight between turns 1 through 5 is superior to Mage and Battle Mage. So they're able to fight and control the board stronger, getting up to the Alfiq, and then they have the Alfiqs. So knowing your deck's individual advantages and knowing what are the disadvantages of different, like Sorcerer clearly has access to Drain, for example, because they have Barrow Stalkers. Adding tech cards like Mentor's Rings have been in play by some high-level players. Probably, I guess. Hi, SK Cyprian. I guess that's what it is. So Mentor Rings, special combat tricks like Mentor's Ring can swing the whole thing. I've definitely been in Alfiq deck versus another Alfiq deck. I thought I was going to win, and they put a Mentor's Ring down, and the whole board has Ward or something, or the whole board has Drain, and they're on the other lane, and I'm on that lane. Like, I'm on the Shadow lane, they're in the field lane. Game over. So finding something to end the game out in the mid-range is really important. So we'll move now to the going over the top. How do you beat Alfiq Conjure as a control deck? So I don't actually have that much experience playing all types of control decks, but I can kind of speak to a little bit. I'm playing Scout, and my two control decks I play the most versus Alfiq's and had success were Uprising Scout and Ebonheart Slay. Uprising Scout, pretty much we're using things like Murkwater Witch, Murkwater Scourge, using curses, Leaf Flicker, finish offs. Basically, with curse, we can curse and wound the Storm Atronach, and we can use a finish off. That's a 2-card, but 2 Magicka play kills the Storm Atronach, or Lava Atronach if they do Mighty Conjurings or whatnot. Oh, by the way, Mighty Conjuring is another way that some people in the mid-range game have chosen to use Mighty Conjuring as a counter to the Alfiq's, which kind of plays badly against some matchups because it can be Javelin, it can be Belligerent Gianted, but if they don't have answers, the Lava Atronach beats the Storm Atronach, and it's not without its risk, but it is something that people have done, and it can succeed. So finish off, Leaf Lurkers, this kind of stuff is my way, and I also use this as a card advantage thing. So as the control player, they're the aggro player. In aggro mirror, both parties have unlimited cards basically, or like too many cards, because they both are hitting each other and they both get a lot of cards. But in control versus aggro, one of our primary advantages is we're going to have unlimited cards, and they're going to run out of cards at turn 9. At about turn 9, they're out of cards, or they're top decking. It's about the turn 9 area. So the critical area is survive till turn 9, then make it impossible for them to win. If you answer the Alfiq Conjures, and I have with my Scout deck, 3 Alfiq Conjures in a row, they lose the game because they have nothing else, because they relied 100% on Alfiq Conjures and Mighty Conjurings and stuff like that. So they rely on that. They're predictable. This is actually one thing about them is they're easy to read. Once you've played enough against them enough, they become it's a situation of did they high roll you and did you get low rolled. If your deck is sufficiently teched to deal with them as a control player, you know what they're in for. They don't know what they're in for because they don't know what your deck is. You know what their deck is because you're more uncommon, and then they're giving you cards. You're not giving them cards. So with the right tech choices, if your cards 2 for 1, even if our cards take 2 cards to deal with them, finish off in a curse, ultimately we will come out on top. We will outgrind them. So I found the curse package to be good. Ebonheart Slay is an interesting one because, interestingly enough, Ebonheart Slay does not seem that popular right now, but I don't think it's actually bad. Like, it's still very good. You don't have Falkreath Defilers anymore. You don't have any of these like crazy Slay Rage plays, and I found that I don't even need to use Rage that much. But when I do use Rage, it's pretty game breaking. It's game winning even against these Alfiq decks because they have a tendency to stack lanes. And the dream play with the Rage is not to kill, but rather to clear. So you use a 2-drop Owl Velothi or Fighter's Guild, and you use Rage with that. And the main advantage Ebonheart has is it has good ramping. So you can ramp to 10 Magicka pretty fast. So if you ramp to 10 Magicka using Astrid Contracts, Orakin Venom Tongues, Thorn Hiss Mages, we can get there. Plays like Red Brahmin, Uprising, these things help us stall to deal with the board. But lethal cards with Rapid Shots and Shadow Shifts, Ebonheart has Rapid Shots and Shadow Shifts, Cradle Crashes and Pyromancers. And if you really want to get crazy, I didn't really tech this way, but You could have Skaven Pyromancers finish off Murkwater Scourges. You could have like a lot of anti Alfiq kind of stuff put into Ebonheart. And again, I'll reiterate it before I'm done, is they give you cards, you don't give them cards. So you're waiting for them to run out of cards. And you're going to see above, like, you might have a lot of anti-Alfiq cards. If you have enough of those in your deck, you're going to get to see them because you are getting extra cards. You're not only are you drawing cards naturally, but you're drawing them from rune breaks. And a single lethal card, like, they can have ward, sure, on like the Storm Atronach or whatever. But just save a rapid shot for it. Or put a really small creature like a Fighter's Guild recruit into that lane and prepare for some Archer's Gambit action, and then just use the Fighter Guild guy to go boop, use Territorial Viper, boop. In fact, I found a Territorial Viper using the Archer's Gambit on the Territorial Viper to be very successful against Alfiq, because you put it in a lane that you don't want to kill something. You use Archer's Gambit to either take off a ward or kill something, and then you Viper into whatever you wanted to really kill. So then you can 7 Magicka, deal with 2 threats. These mid-range decks, actually, some of them play 1 threat at a time, which plays right into the lethal pinging strategy. You struggle a little bit more with the decks that go wide. Sort of the other anti-Alfiq decks that are really aggro, Spell Sword, Empire, go wide, Mercenary Captain, kabam. So I know Tribunal is, I don't really know where to class Tribunal, because there is this little place where Tribunal is being played, kind of as an Alfiq deck, kind of as a control deck, but it's a control deck that has Alfiq conjures that counters Alfiqs, but also waits them out. It waits them out. So it tries to be the best of both worlds. It tries to be the control deck that does not break runes and just it can survive them, and then it sets up its return lethal crackback using the Alfiq conjures. That is another style of deck. I don't play it personally. I gave it a shot and I didn't like it for some specific reasons, but I know that's another way to make it work. Oh, thank you, SKC Cyprian. I am so out of here. Oh, talk about Empire. Deal 30 damage. What to choose? We're hopefully going to hit top 10. We really don't want to play any more games, but we're really proud of our last few wins. If you look at our last few wins, 2 top players that were at Master Series, Karakanzu and Flo. And Flo was on a very powerful deck. And Life with Cena and Mad Oblivion are very good card players as well. So we're pretty proud of that. The reason why we're doing this set review is because we lost our footage. We actually had we already did the set review on Blue, so it was quite the man up for me to be like, okay, we did this already, but we're gonna do it again. For the love of the people. But hopefully we'll have a good time in doing set reviews of the next sets. We don't know how long TESL will entertain us, to be honest with you. But we plan on playing many, many games but in the future. But TESL is a very good game. Very underrated. I've played a lot of games. I think this game can succeed and do better than it can. I think it has much more potential than people realize. So I'd like to see this game really go far. I don't think... Some people have speculated that one of TESL's big chances at... Okay, let me put it this way. You might think TESL is a dead game because not too many people play TESL. But from my point of view, if a person finds out about a game, it's a new game to them. They don't care when the game was made. Just like when I found out about TESL. I don't care when the game's made. If a person finds out about TESL, they can really like it. We just found out recently that a big singer, Post Malone, likes TESL too. If I like TESL, I play so many games and I like TESL. Post Malone's probably played plenty of games and he likes TESL. And he can play whatever game he wants, just like me. I can play whatever game I want. But I'm choosing to play TESL. To me, these are signs of hope for games like TESL because new players don't actually care how old the game is. They just care is the game fun. And they also care about if they can find content about the game. So if they can't find any content about the game, because content about the game that helps shine how fun the game is really important. I played TESL and my problem with TESL was it took a really long time to get to the fun part. Like, I only started playing TESL seriously when I saw the Master Series and I watched how much fun the games looked, and I was like, well, I want to play games like that. That looks amazing. So I was willing to grind out so many hours where my games were not as fun to make it to the fun part, and as rewarding. But it took too long. It took too long for me to get here, and I know that that's the big design challenge. It's like, how can we get people to the aha moment? How can we lower the barrier entry and make it faster for players to have fun, especially seasoned card game players? Because there are so many card game players who play Hearthstone, Shadowverse, etc., Gwent. They're all looking for the next best thing. And TESL could be the next best thing for them if it wasn't so hard for them to get immediately into the amazing gameplay. I think also people have said that another major time for Elder Scrolls Legends to add more players will be Elder Scrolls 6, because a lot of people love Skyrim, and personally I think the name Elder Scrolls Legends is a very bad name for a game. I think the name of the game should change. I think that it's not memorable, it's too long, it's really hard to search, and there are too many, like, if I told you I play Legends, you're like, which one? Like, Legends, there's so many games called League of Legends. Do you play League of Legends? Like, you can't call your name Legends and expect to stand out. As for what the name of the game should be, I don't know what it is, but I think the name of the game should change. And I think that that Elder Scrolls 6 will be a major time when people are looking for more Elder Scrolls stuff. So I want to encourage the TESL team to keep on trying hard, try to keep on making good content, make the game as good as possible, make that a little bit easier to play. And then when the players from Elder Scrolls 6 search for it and they find this game, they'll be like, wow, this is a fun game. And they won't really care how old it was. They don't care anything about the past, etc. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. I should also mention that I'm 26, so I've seen many games die already in my young life. Games that I love. I've seen many games die that I've loved. And I see games that I love that are dying. So it's the natural order and state of things for games to die. But one of the tragedies is there are many games that I play and I'm like, I love this game. And I just discovered it and I'm like, ooh, when's the sequel come in? Oh, it's not coming out because the company that made it ran out of money because they're dead. That's the tragedy. So the tragedy is when a game dies and the people love the game, but they can't see another one come out because it's not going to come out. It will never come out again until someone buys the IP rights and says they'll revive it. So that's a possibility. But I've seen many excellent games perish. So, and it's also very when these games perish, it's amazing from my point of view. It's almost like a world has died, because it's like you have a game, the community comes around it and they enjoy the game, but the game no longer can be profitable and it dies, and the people who play the game will be sad because they put money in the game. All your items, all your assets, they're all worthless once the game's gone, and then your friends and your friendships, they disappear. So it's like a universe fades in front of your eyes. So it's actually in the best interest of everybody to have their game that they love prosper and do really well. I can talk about this forever, so it's time to sleep. I'm going crazy. Good night. Skyrim champions. I'm not against the name Skyrim Champions. This is not as bad as it sounds like. It's better than Elder Scrolls Legends. Sorry. But let's host and we're gonna sleep. Good night.